Tonight, the most powerful man in Chicago will discover that his marriage is not a business deal, but a death sentence in disguise. As Lucian Moretti, the mafia boss known as the Black King, sees the terror in his young bride's eyes, he begins to realize he's not the husband. He's the captor. And the man who can command the city with a nod is about to face an enemy he's never fought, his own inner demon. Follow this story to the end, and comment with the name of the city you're watching to let me know how far my story has progressed. The rain came down like bullets against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, 23 stories above the Chicago streets, where people died quietly and nobody asked questions. Lucien Moretti stood at the glass, watching the city bleed neon through the storm, a crystal tumbler of whiskey warming between his palms. Behind him, somewhere in the 14,000 square feet of steel and marble and suffocating silence, his new wife was hiding. He'd been married for exactly 4 hours. The wedding had been efficient, clinical. 200 guests who smiled with their mouths and calculated with their eyes, measuring alliances and weaknesses like vultures circling fresh meat. Isabella had worn white, a cruel joke considering nothing about this arrangement was pure. She'd stood beside him at the altar with her spine straight and her hands folded, looking like a porcelain doll someone had posed and forgotten to animate. She hadn't looked at him once during the vows. Not once. Lucien drained the whiskey and set the glass down hard enough that crystal sang against marble. The sound echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. Somewhere in the east wing, he heard a door close. Soft. Careful. The kind of sound someone makes when they're trying very hard not to be noticed. He was 37 years old and he'd killed his first man at 19. Broke the guy's neck in a basement in Cicero over a debt that didn't matter to anyone except the people who needed to see blood to believe in consequences. Lucien had walked out of that basement with red on his hands and ice in his chest, and he'd built an empire on that ice. The Moretti family controlled half the South Side, owned judges and congressmen and police captains the way other men owned cars. He'd orchestrated executions in restaurant bathrooms, burned evidence in municipal incinerators, made people disappear so thoroughly their own mothers forgot their names. Nothing rattled him. Nothing. But 4 hours ago, when the priest, or whoever the hell that man was, had pronounced them husband and wife, and Lucien had lifted the veil from Isabella's face, he'd seen something in her eyes that punched through 30 years of scar tissue and drew blood. Terror, pure, primal, the kind of fear he'd seen in the eyes of men right before they died. She'd looked at him like he was already reaching for her throat. Lucien turned from the window and walked through the penthouse, his footsteps muffled by Persian rugs that cost more than most people earned in a year. The wedding reception had been held here, champagne and lobster and a 12-tier cake nobody ate because everyone was too busy networking and measuring each other for coffins. His men had cleared out the last guest 2 hours ago. Now the space felt cavernous, empty, like a mausoleum with better lighting. He found the door to the east bedroom closed, not locked. He'd had all the interior locks removed years ago, a security measure that suddenly felt obscene. Through the wood, he heard nothing. No movement, no breathing. Just silence thick enough to choke on. Lucien raised his hand to knock, then stopped. His knuckles hovered an inch from the door while something unfamiliar coiled in his stomach. Uncertainty. When was the last time he'd felt uncertain about anything? Isabella? His voice came out rougher than he'd intended. We need to talk. No response. He tried again. I'm not going to hurt you. The words tasted strange in his mouth, foreign, like a language he'd never learned to speak properly. Still nothing. Lucien pushed the door open slowly, giving her time to protest or scream or throw something at his head. The room was dark, except for the ambient glow from the city filtering through sheer curtains. Isabella sat on the edge of the bed, not in it, on it, still wearing her wedding dress. The dress was a monstrosity of lace and beading that had probably cost as much as a luxury sedan. She'd pulled her knees up to her chest, arms wrapped around her shins, making herself as small as possible. She didn't look up when he entered. You can't hide in here forever, Lucien said, staying near the door, keeping distance between them. This is your home now. I know. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She still wasn't looking at him. Then why? I'm not hiding. She finally lifted her head. In the dim light, her face was all shadows and angles. She was beautiful in the way expensive art was beautiful, something you admired from a distance and never touched. I'm waiting. For what? For you to do whatever you're going to do. The words hit him like a fist to the solar plexus. Lucienne had walked into this room ready to establish boundaries, to make it clear that despite the contract and the ceremony and the legal documents that now bound them, he wasn't a monster. He'd expected resistance, maybe. Anger. The kind of defiance he could work with. Not this. Not resignation. I'm not going to do anything, he said carefully. Isabella's laugh was sharp and humorless. Everyone does something. That's how this works, right? My father explained it very clearly. Lucien's jaw tightened. Raphael Valles, the man who'd negotiated this marriage like he was selling a used car, haggling over terms and conditions while his daughter sat in the next room pretending not to exist. Lucien had met with Raphael 6 times over 3 months. Not once had the man mentioned that Isabella didn't want this. Not once had he suggested his daughter was anything other than a willing participant in this arrangement. What exactly did your father tell you? Lucienne asked. She pulled her knees tighter against her chest, the wedding dress bunched around her like a collapsed parachute. That you were powerful, that you could protect us, that if I married you, my sisters would be safe. That's it? He said. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. He said I should make you happy, that my job was to make you happy, and if I did that, everything would be okay. Lucien felt something dark and violent unfurl in his chest. He'd negotiated with Raphael because the Valles family had shipping connections in Colombia and Mexico that the Moretti Empire needed, clean routes, reliable transport, the kind of infrastructure that was worth its weight in gold in their world. Raphael had offered the marriage as part of the package, a way to cement the alliance, to tie the families together with blood and law. It had seemed logical at the time. Business. Now, looking at Isabella curled up on that bed like she was waiting for an execution, Lucien realized he'd been played. Raphael hadn't been securing an alliance. He'd been unloading a liability, getting rid of a daughter he couldn't control or couldn't afford or couldn't protect from whatever hell was chasing him. And Lucien had paid him millions for the privilege. How old are you? Lucien asked suddenly. Isabella blinked. 22. 22. Jesus Christ. He'd known she was young, the paperwork had been clear, but hearing her say it out loud made his skin crawl. When he was 22, he'd been running numbers for his uncle and learning how to make problems disappear. When she was 22, she should have been graduating college or backpacking through Europe or doing whatever the hell normal 22-year-olds did. Instead, she was here, married to a man 15 years older who made his money off fear and violence and things that happened in the dark. You don't have to be afraid of me, Lucien said, and even as the words left his mouth, he knew how hollow they sounded. How could she not be afraid? Everything about him was designed to inspire fear. The way he dressed, the way he spoke, the reputation that preceded him into every room like a cloud of poison gas. Okay, Isabella said quietly. I mean it. Okay. Isabella, I said okay. The sudden volume made them both flinch. She pressed her hands over her mouth like she'd said something unforgivable. Her eyes went wide. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Stop apologizing. I'm sorry. She caught herself. Tears were starting to track down her face, leaving dark trails through her makeup. I don't know what you want from me. That made 2 of them. Lucien dragged a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the day settling into his bones like lead. He'd orchestrated this marriage because it made strategic sense, because it opened doors that had been locked to him, because in their world everything was a transaction and everyone had a price, and he thought he understood the terms. He hadn't understood anything. Listen to me, he said, choosing each word carefully. I'm not going to touch you. Not tonight. Not until you want me to. And if that never happens, then it never happens. Do you understand? Isabella stared at him like he'd just started speaking a language she didn't know. But the contract, fuck the contract. She flinched again at the profanity. Lucien added that to the growing list of things he apparently needed to watch out for. No sudden movements, no loud voices, no cursing. How the hell was he supposed to live in his own house if he had to constantly monitor himself like a bomb that might detonate? The contract says we're married, Lucien continued, forcing his voice into something calmer. It doesn't say anything about what happens behind closed doors. That's between us. Nobody else. My father said, "Your father isn't here." The words came out harder than he'd intended. Isabella's face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled over, and she was crying in earnest now, silent sobs that shook her whole body. The wedding dress rustled with each breath. She pressed her face against her knees, trying to hide, trying to disappear, and something in Lucien's chest cracked open like a frozen lake giving way under pressure. He'd made men cry before. Lots of them, usually right before they died. He'd watched them beg and plead and promise anything if he'd just let them live, and he'd felt nothing. Less than nothing. Their tears were just water. Their fear was just data to be used and discarded. This was different. This felt like drowning. "I'll sleep in the West Wing," Lucien said abruptly. "You have this entire floor to yourself. If you need anything, there's a phone by the bed. Extension 3 reaches my personal line, 4 reaches kitchen, 5 is security. Just don't go outside without telling someone. It's not safe." He turned to leave before she could respond, before he could say something else that would make this worse. His hand was on the doorknob when her voice stopped him. "Why?" Lucien looked back. Isabella had lifted her face from her knees. Her makeup was destroyed, black mascara running in rivers down her cheeks. She looked young, impossibly young, like someone who should be worried about midterms and bad dates, not survival. "Why what?" he asked. "Why aren't you—" She gestured vaguely, encompassing the room, the situation, everything. "Everyone said you would. They said men like you always do." Men like you. Lucien wondered what kind of men she meant. Criminals? Killers? Monsters who bought brides like livestock and expected them to smile about it? All of the above, probably. "Because," he said finally, "I'm a lot of things. But I'm not that." It wasn't entirely true. He'd done worse things than force himself on an unwilling woman. He'd done things that would make her current fear look like a pleasant dream. But standing there in that doorway, watching her watch him, like he might change his mind at any second, Lucien decided to be whatever she needed him to be in this moment, even if it was a lie. He left the room and closed the door behind him. The penthouse stretched out before him, empty and cold. Somewhere in the building below, his men were stationed at their posts, monitoring security cameras and checking in with patrols. The city beyond the windows kept bleeding neon through the rain. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Lucien walked to his study and poured another whiskey, then another. By the fourth, his hands had stopped shaking. By the sixth, he'd convinced himself that this was manageable, a problem like any other problem. He'd built an empire out of worse situations. The phone rang at 2:30 in the morning. Lucien grabbed it on the first ring, expecting an emergency. A shipment intercepted. A rival family making a move. Something that required immediate and decisive action. "Moretti," he answered. "We need to talk about your wife." The voice belonged to Marco Calabrese, his oldest captain and the closest thing Lucien had to a friend. Marco had been with him since the beginning, back when they were both stupid kids who thought they'd live forever. "Not now," Lucien said. "Yeah, now. You know who her father really is?" Lucien's hand tightened around the phone. "Rafael Valles, Colombian shipping connections, clean routes through—" "Rafael Valles is drowning in debt to the Sinaloa people," Marco interrupted. "He's been laundering money for them through his shipping company for 5 years. Last month, he lost a container with $3 million worth of product. They want their money back, and he doesn't have it." The room suddenly felt colder. Lucien set down his whiskey glass very carefully. "How long have you known this?" "Found out 4 hours ago. I've been tracking down confirmation. It's solid, Luce. Your new father-in-law is a dead man walking. The only question is when the Sinaloa people decide to collect." Lucien closed his eyes. The pieces were clicking into place now, forming a picture he should have seen months ago. Rafael hadn't been securing an alliance when he offered his daughter in marriage. He'd been buying time, hoping that attaching himself to the Moretti family would make him untouchable, betting that Lucien's reputation would be enough to keep the cartels from collecting their debt in blood. It was a smart play. It was also suicidal. "What about the girl?" Lucien asked. "Does she know?" Hard to say, but there's more. Raphael has two other daughters. Younger, still living at home. Of course he did. Isabella had mentioned sisters, said they needed to be safe. Now Lucien understood what she'd meant. Where are they now? Still in the Valles house in Pilsen. I've got eyes on the property. No unusual activity yet, but if the Sinaloa people decide to send a message... Marco didn't need to finish the sentence. Lucien knew exactly what kind of message the cartels sent. He'd cleaned up enough of their work over the years. Put a security detail on them, Lucien said. Quiet. I don't want the father knowing. You sure about that? Because protecting Raphael's family is going to look like you're backing his play. The Sinaloa people won't like it. I don't care what they like. Luce, do it. Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then, this is about the girl, isn't it? Your wife. Lucien didn't answer. Jesus Christ, Marco breathed. You care about her. I don't even know her. That's not what I asked. Lucien hung up. He sat in the darkness of his study, watching the city through the window, thinking about Isabella curled up on that bed in her wedding dress, waiting for him to do whatever he was going to do, resigned to it, expecting it. How long had she known? How long had she been living with the knowledge that her father was selling her to buy himself time? That her marriage was just another debt to be paid, another transaction in a long chain of transactions that would probably end in blood? Maybe she'd known all along. Maybe that's why she'd looked at him with such terror during the ceremony. Not because she didn't know him, but because she did. Because she understood exactly what she was being traded into. Or maybe she'd been kept in the dark. Fed lies about protection and security and a bright future, while her father counted his money and planned his escape. Either way, it didn't matter. She was in this now. They both were. Lucien stood and walked back through the penthouse, his footsteps echoing off marble and glass. The east wing was silent. He stopped outside Isabella's door and listened. Nothing. Maybe she was asleep. Maybe she was lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering when the other shoe would drop. He pressed his palm against the door. The wood was cool beneath his hand. I won't let them hurt you, he whispered to the silence. Any of you. It was a promise he had no business making, a commitment that could start a war he wasn't sure he could win. But standing there in the darkness, thinking about that terrified 22-year-old girl who'd been traded like property to pay her father's debts, Lucien discovered something unsettling. He meant it. Bardsake. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through storm clouds that hadn't quite given up. Lucien had managed 3 hours of sleep sprawled across the leather couch in his study, whiskey glass still in hand. He woke to the sound of his phone buzzing with messages. Updates from Marco, check-ins from his lieutenants. The usual chaos of running an empire that operated in the shadows. Nothing from Isabella. He showered and dressed in his usual uniform, black suit, black shirt, no tie. The closest thing he had to armor. Then he went looking for his wife. He found her in the kitchen. She'd changed out of the wedding dress into clothes he didn't recognize, jeans and an oversized sweater that hung off one shoulder. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Without the makeup and the formal attire, she looked even younger. College student young. High school young. 22, he reminded himself. She's 22. It didn't make him feel any better. Isabella stood at the counter with her back to him, holding a coffee mug with both hands like she was trying to absorb its warmth. She didn't turn around when he entered, but her shoulders tensed. She'd heard him. Good morning, Lucien said, keeping his voice neutral. Morning? She still didn't turn around. An awkward silence settled between them. Lucien had negotiated truces between warring families. He'd mediated disputes that could have turned into bloodbaths. He knew how to read a room, how to say the right thing at the right time, to diffuse tension or escalate it depending on what the situation required. None of that seemed useful now. Did you sleep? He tried. Some. Are you hungry? I can have something made. Oh, I'm fine. She was lying. Lucien could see it in the rigid set of her spine, the way her knuckles had gone white around the coffee mug. She was the opposite of fine. But pushing her would only make it worse. He poured his own coffee and leaned against the counter on the opposite side of the kitchen, maintaining distance. The space between them felt like a minefield. One wrong step and everything would explode. We need to discuss some things, Lucien said. Isabella finally turned to face him. In the morning light, he could see the shadows under her eyes. She hadn't slept much, if at all. Okay. Your father... I don't want to talk about him. The words came out sharp, defensive, interesting. We need to, Lucien insisted. There are things you should know. Like what? That he sold me? That I was worth exactly $3 million in a shipping contract? Her voice was rising. I already know. I've known for months. So she had known. That answered one question at least. It's worse than that, Lucien said quietly. Isabella laughed. It was a brittle, broken sound. How could it possibly be worse? He traded his daughter to the most dangerous man in Chicago to save his own ass. What could be worse than that? He's in debt to the Sinaloa cartel, $3 million, and he doesn't have it. The color drained from Isabella's face. The coffee mug slipped from her fingers and shattered against the tile floor. Brown liquid spread across the white surface like blood. No, she whispered. No, he said. He promised. He lied. Lucien stayed where he was, resisting the urge to cross the kitchen and, what, comfort her? He didn't know how to do that. He lost a shipment. The cartel wants their money back. They're going to come for him. Isabella's legs buckled. She caught herself against the counter, breathing hard. My sisters. Jesus Christ, my sisters. He said if I did this, they'd be safe. He promised they'd be safe. They will be. She looked up at him with wild eyes. How? How can they be safe if the fucking cartels are involved? You don't know what they do to people. You don't... I know exactly what they do, Lucien interrupted. And I'm not going to let it happen to them. You can't stop it. Nobody can stop it. Once they decide to come for you, Isabella. He said her name firmly enough that she stopped. Look at me. She did. Tears were streaming down her face again, but her eyes were focused now, present. I have men watching your sisters right now, Lucien said. They're being protected. Your father doesn't know, and he's not going to know. As far as the Sinaloa people are concerned, your sisters are under Moretti protection now, which means they're untouchable. Why would you do that? It was the same question she'd asked last night. Why? Like the concept of someone helping her without expecting immediate payment was incomprehensible. Because you're my wife, Lucien said simply, which makes them family, and I protect family. It wasn't entirely true. He'd had plenty of family members over the years who'd betrayed him, stolen from him, sold him out. He'd dealt with them the same way he dealt with every other problem, efficiently and permanently. Blood didn't mean loyalty in his world, but Isabella didn't need to know that. She was staring at him like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. I don't understand you. You don't have to understand me. You just have to trust that I'm not going to let anything happen to your sisters. And what about my father? Lucien considered lying. It would be easy. Tell her Raphael was under protection too. Let her believe everyone was safe and everything would work out fine. But something about the way she was looking at him, like she was searching for solid ground in the middle of an earthquake, made him go with honesty instead. Your father made his choices, he said carefully. He's going to have to live with the consequences. Live with them? Her voice cracked. You mean die with them? Probably. She sucked in a sharp breath. For a moment, Lucien thought she might scream at him, might throw something, might finally release some of the fear and anger that was clearly eating her alive from the inside out. Instead, she just nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. Okay? He did this to himself. He knew what he was doing when he took their money, when he lost their product, when he traded me like... Her voice broke. I hope they make it hurt. The venom in her words surprised him. This wasn't resignation anymore. This was rage, clean and cold and absolute. Lucien was starting to realize his wife was full of surprises. Do you want him dead? He asked bluntly. Isabella looked at him for a long time. Her jaw worked like she was chewing on the answer, trying to decide what truth she could afford to tell. Finally, she said, I want my sisters safe. Whatever it takes to make that happen, I want it. Is that answer enough? It was more than enough. It was perfect. The next 3 days passed in careful orbits. Lucien ran his empire from the study, taking meetings with lieutenants and captains who eyed Isabella with open curiosity whenever she drifted through the penthouse. She was a ghost, mostly. Present, but not present. She'd found the library and spent hours there, curled up with books that looked older than both of them combined. She didn't ask him questions, didn't make demands. Barely spoke except for quiet thank yous when staff brought her meals or coffee or whatever else she needed. It was driving Lucien insane. He dealt with hostages who screamed less, kidnapping victims who adjusted better. There was something profoundly wrong about having a wife who acted like she was waiting for sentencing. On the fourth day, he found her in the library again. She'd fallen asleep on the couch with a book open on her chest. Some massive hardcover about European history. In sleep, she looked peaceful, almost serene, like whatever nightmares she was carrying had taken a temporary vacation. Lucien stood in the doorway watching her breathe and felt something twist in his chest that he didn't have a name for. His phone buzzed. Marco's name lit up the screen. Lucien stepped out of the library and answered. "What?" "We've got a problem," Marco said without preamble. "Someone tried to grab one of the Valles sisters outside her school 20 minutes ago." Every muscle in Lucien's body went rigid. "Which one?" "The youngest. Sophia. 10 years old. 2 guys in a black SUV. They had her halfway into the vehicle when our detail intervened." "Tell me she's okay." "She's fine. Shaken up, but fine. The guys scattered when they realized we were there. We grabbed one of them. He's downstairs in the basement if you want to have a conversation." Lucien glanced back at the library. Isabella was still asleep, oblivious. "I'm on my way." He made it to the elevator before he stopped himself. Turned around. Went back to the library and grabbed a blanket from the chair by the window. Draped it over Isabella carefully, trying not to wake her. Her eyes opened anyway. "Lucien?" She sounded groggy, confused. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." The lie came automatically. "Go back to sleep." She sat up slowly, the book sliding off her chest. "You're lying. I can tell when people lie to me." Of course she could. She'd probably spent her entire life learning to read the men around her, trying to anticipate danger before it arrived. It was a survival skill, one she'd clearly mastered. "Someone tried to take your sister," Lucien said. There was no gentle way to say it. Isabella went white. "Which one?" "Sophia. She's okay. My men stopped it." "Where is she?" "Still at school. I have a team bringing her here." "Here?" Isabella stood up too fast. The book hit the floor with a dull thud. "You can't bring her here. This place is safe," Lucien interrupted. "This place is safe. Safer than anywhere else in the city right now. I have 30 men stationed in this building. Every entrance is monitored. Every floor is secured. If someone wants to get to your sister, they'll have to go through all of them first, and they won't make it past the lobby." Isabella was shaking. Her hands were fists at her sides, knuckles white. "What about my other sister, Anna?" "Already being collected. She'll be here within the hour. My father can handle himself." "You son of a bitch." The words came out cold, certain. "You're going to let them kill him?" "Yes." She stared at him. Lucien watched her process it, watched the calculations happening behind her eyes. She was smart, sharp. She understood exactly what he was telling her without having to spell it out in detail. "Will it end with him?" she asked finally. "If they kill him, will they leave my sisters alone?" "That depends on who gave the order. And you're going to find out who gave the order." It wasn't a question. She already knew. "I've got one of them in the basement," Lucien confirmed. "He's going to tell me everything he knows." "Then what?" "Then I'm going to make sure this never happens again." Isabella crossed the library in 3 strides and grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, desperate. Promise me my sisters will be safe." "I promise. No matter what it costs. No matter who you have to—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "Just promise me." Lucien looked down at her hand on his arm, at the white knuckles and the slight tremor running through her fingers, at the desperation etched into every line of her face. "I promise," he said again. She released him and stepped back. "Then do whatever you have to do. I'll check." The man in the basement was young, mid-20s maybe. Latino. Tattoos running up both arms. He was zip-tied to a chair in the middle of the room, blood streaming from his nose where one of Lucien's men had introduced his face to the concrete floor. The man's eyes tracked Lucien as he descended the stairs, calculating odds, measuring escape routes. There were no escape routes. Marco stood in the corner, arms crossed. This is Eddie Reyes, low-level enforcer for the Sinaloa people. Hasn't said much except for some creative suggestions about what we can do with ourselves. Lucien pulled up a chair and sat down directly in front of Eddie, close enough that their knees almost touched. You tried to kidnap a 10-year-old girl. Eddie spat blood onto the floor. I was following orders. Whose orders? Go fuck yourself. Lucien nodded slowly. Marco, get me pliers. Eddie's eyes widened. Wait! And a blowtorch. Jesus Christ, man, You've got about 30 seconds before I start removing body parts, Lucien said calmly. Use them wisely. Eddie was breathing hard now. Panic sweat had started beading on his forehead. You don't understand. If I talk, they'll kill me. And if you don't talk, I'll kill you. Except my way will take considerably longer and hurt considerably more. Lucien leaned forward. Here's the thing, Eddie. I don't actually care about you. You're a means to an end. Information I need to protect something that matters to me. So you can either give me that information quickly, and I'll make your death painless, or you can hold out, and I'll make you beg me to kill you. Your choice. Marco returned with the pliers. Eddie lasted 15 minutes. By the end, Lucien had names, addresses, and a complete picture of what had been set in motion. The attempted kidnapping hadn't been ordered by the Sinaloa cartel. It had been arranged by Rafael Velez himself. Isabella's father had tried to have his own daughter kidnapped to force Lucien into confronting the cartel directly, hoping that the resulting war would either destroy Lucien's empire or scare the Sinaloa people into backing off. Either way, Rafael came out ahead. Either his debt was forgotten in the chaos, or his new son-in-law was powerful enough to make the whole problem disappear. It was brilliant in its sociopathy. Kill him, Lucien told Marco. Clean, then dump the body somewhere the Sinaloa people will find it. Make it look like a rival crew did it. Marco nodded and drew his weapon. Eddie started begging. Lucien walked back upstairs before the shot rang out. Isabella was waiting in his study. She'd changed clothes again, black pants, black sweater, like she was dressed for a funeral. Maybe she was. Her eyes tracked him as he entered, searching his face for answers. My sisters? She asked. Upstairs in the guest rooms. Sophia's watching TV. Anna's taking a shower. Are they okay? Physically, yes. Emotionally, Lucien shrugged. They're scared, but they're safe. Isabella nodded slowly. Then, did you kill him? The man who tried to take Sophia? Yes. Good. No hesitation, no moral struggle, just cold acceptance. Did he tell you who gave the order? Lucien sat down behind his desk. Every muscle in his body ached. He felt old suddenly, tired in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. Your father. The words hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to detonate. Isabella didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't even look surprised. She just closed her eyes slowly, like she was absorbing a blow she'd been expecting. Of course it was, she whispered. He was trying to start a war, using Sophia as bait to force me into confronting the cartel, hoping I'd either destroy them or be destroyed trying. And my sisters and I were just collateral damage. Yes. She opened her eyes. They were dry, clear. I want him dead. Isabella, I mean it. She stood up, her whole body vibrating with barely contained rage. I want you to kill him, not the cartels, you. I want him to know it was because of me, because of what he did to us. Can you do that? Lucien should have said no, should have told her that revenge wouldn't fix anything, wouldn't heal the damage, wouldn't make her feel better. He'd seen enough vengeance over the years to know it was a poison that ate you from the inside out. But looking at Isabella standing there in her funeral clothes, asking him to execute the man who'd sold her like property and then tried to use her baby sister as a weapon, Lucien found he didn't want to talk her out of it. He wanted to hand her the knife herself. I can do that, he said quietly. She let out a long breath. Some of the tension left her shoulders. When? Soon. I need to make it look like an accident. If the cartels think I killed him, they'll see it as a declaration of war. How long? A week, maybe less. Isabella nodded. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Lucien? Yeah? Thank you for protecting them. For... She gestured vaguely. Everything. You don't need to thank me. I do, though, because nobody else would have done what you're doing. Nobody else would have cared. She left before he could respond. Lucien sat in the darkness of his study, listening to the sounds of his penthouse coming to life. Sophia's laughter drifting down from upstairs. Anna's music playing softly through closed doors. Isabella's footsteps moving through the halls. A family. He'd made himself a family in the span of 4 days, and in doing so, he'd signed his name to a war he wasn't sure he could win. But as he sat there in the darkness, thinking about the promise he'd made, Lucien realized something unsettling. He didn't care about the odds anymore. He just cared about keeping them safe, whatever it took. Golg, Raphael Velez died on a Tuesday. His car went off the road at 3 in the morning on a stretch of highway outside the city where the guardrails had rusted through and nobody bothered to fix them. The vehicle flipped twice before slamming into a concrete drainage culvert. By the time emergency services arrived, Raphael was already gone. Crushed chest, severed spine, the kind of injuries that didn't leave room for miracles. The police ruled it an accident within 6 hours. Wet roads, high speed, driver possibly impaired. Case closed. Lucien got the confirmation at dawn. He was in his study reviewing shipping manifests when Marco called with the news, his voice flat and professional. It's done. Clean. No complications. Good, Lucien said and hung up. He sat there for a long time after that, staring at nothing. Outside the windows, Chicago was waking up, traffic building, lights flickering on in distant buildings, the city grinding into another day of existence. Everything looked the same as it always did. Normal. Mundane. Except he'd just killed his father-in-law. Not directly. He hadn't been the one to cut the brake lines or tamper with the steering column, or whatever the hell Marco's people had done to make that car leave the road at exactly the right moment. But the order had come from him. The decision had been his, and he felt nothing. No guilt, no remorse. Just a vague sense of completion. Like checking an item off a to-do list. That should have bothered him more than it did. Footsteps in the hallway pulled him from his thoughts. Light. Hesitant. Isabella appeared in the doorway wearing an oversized t-shirt and sweatpants, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked like she hadn't slept, dark circles under her eyes, skin too pale. Is it done? She asked quietly. Yes. She nodded once, drew in a slow breath and released it. How? Car accident. The police have already confirmed it. When will they notify the family? Probably within the hour. Isabella wrapped her arms around herself. She was shaking slightly, though whether from cold or shock or something else entirely, Lucien couldn't tell. My sisters, they need to hear it from me, not from some cop reading off a report. I'll have Marco arrange it. Make sure you get the call first. Thank you. The words were automatic, robotic. Like she was going through the motions of a script she'd memorized but didn't fully understand. Lucien stood and crossed to the small bar in the corner of his study, poured 2 glasses of whiskey even though it was barely 6 in the morning, handed one to Isabella. Drink this. She took it without argument and downed half the glass in one swallow, coughed. Her eyes watered. Jesus, what is this? 20-year scotch. Tastes like gasoline. Expensive gasoline. That pulled a ghost of a smile from her. It disappeared almost immediately, but for a second it had been there. Real. I thought I'd feel different, Isabella said, staring into her glass. When it happened, I thought I'd feel something. Relief, maybe, or guilt, but I just feel empty. That's normal. Is it? Because I just helped orchestrate my father's murder and I can't even cry about it. What does that make me? Human, Lucien said simply. She looked up at him. Is that what you tell yourself? When you do things like this? I don't tell myself anything. I just do what needs to be done and move on. Doesn't that get exhausting? Never feeling anything? Lucien finished his whiskey and set the glass down carefully. I feel plenty, I'm just good at compartmentalizing. Teach me how. No. The word came out sharper than he'd intended. Isabella flinched slightly, and Lucien felt that now familiar twist in his chest. He was hurting her without meaning to, adding to the damage that had already been done. I mean, he said more gently, you don't want to be like me. Trust me on that. And what are you like? Empty, he said, throwing her own word back at her. Just better at hiding it. They stood there in silence, two people who barely knew each other, bonded by violence and necessity, and a marriage certificate that was supposed to mean something but mostly just felt like another contract in a life full of contracts. The phone on Lucien's desk rang. He answered it, listened for 30 seconds, hung up. That was the police, he said. They're calling your mother now to notify her about Raphael. Isabella's face went carefully blank. I should call my sisters before they hear it from her. Use the phone in here. I'll give you privacy. No. She said it quickly, almost desperately. Stay, please. I don't want to be alone when I tell them. So Lucien stayed. He watched Isabella dial the number with shaking hands, watched her face crumple when Anna answered, her older sister's voice loud enough in the quiet study that he could hear the confusion. Watched Isabella explain what had happened in a voice that was too calm, too controlled, like she was reciting facts instead of delivering the news that would reshape her sister's entire world. Sophia started crying in the background, high-pitched, inconsolable, the sound of a child learning that the world was crueler than she'd imagined. Isabella held it together for 15 minutes, walked Anna and Sophia through what would happen next, who would come to the house, what they needed to do, where they would stay. She promised them everything would be okay, even though it was a lie, and everyone knew it. When she finally hung up, she made it exactly 3 steps before her legs gave out. Lucien caught her before she hit the floor. She collapsed against him, her whole body shaking with sobs that came from somewhere deep and primal. He held her awkwardly, unsure what to do with his hands, where to put them, how to offer comfort when comfort wasn't something he'd had much practice with. I killed him, Isabella gasped between sobs. I told you to do it, and you did it, and now he's dead, and I killed him. You didn't kill anyone? I did, because I asked you to, because I wanted him dead. What does that make me? It makes you someone who protected her family, Lucien said quietly. Nothing more. Nothing less. She cried harder. Lucien kept holding her, feeling the wet heat of her tears soaking through his shirt, feeling the way her fingers dug into his back like she was trying to anchor herself to something solid in a world that had just tilted sideways. Eventually the sobs subsided into hiccups. Then silence. Isabella pulled back slightly, wiping at her face with the sleeve of her shirt. Her eyes were swollen, red, devastated. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what? For falling apart like that. Don't apologize for being human. She laughed. It was a broken sound. You keep saying that word like it means something. It does. Then why don't I feel human? Why do I just feel like a monster? Lucien wanted to tell her that she wasn't a monster, that monsters didn't cry over the consequences of their actions or question their own morality or feel guilt for protecting the people they loved. But the words felt hollow even in his own head. So instead he said, because being human means carrying the weight of the choices you make, and some choices are heavier than others. Isabella stared at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his chest, right over his heart. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For not lying to me. Everyone else always lies. Lucien rested his hand on the back of her head. Her hair was soft beneath his palm, warm. I'll make you a deal. I won't lie to you if you don't lie to me. Deal. They stayed like that for a while longer. Two damaged people holding each other in the gray light of early morning, trying to figure out how to exist in a world they'd helped make more violent. The funeral was held 6 days later at a cemetery on the north side of the city. Gray skies, cold wind, the kind of weather that made you believe in misery as a physical force. Isabella stood between her sisters at the graveside, dressed in black that made her look like a shadow. Anna was on her right, 19 years old, tall and angry, her jaw locked tight like she was biting back words she knew she shouldn't say. Sophia was on her left, small and lost, holding Isabella's hand like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to earth. Their mother was absent. She'd taken Raphael's death badly, collapsing into pills and alcohol and bitter recriminations about how the world was conspiring against her. Isabella had visited her twice in the week since Raphael died. Both times, her mother had blamed her for everything, for marrying a criminal, for bringing danger into their lives, for not being a good enough daughter to prevent this tragedy. Isabella had stopped visiting after that. Lucian stood back from the grave, positioned near the tree line where he could watch the proceedings without being part of them. Marco was beside him, hands in his coat pockets, scanning the crowd with professional paranoia. Most of the mourners were business associates of Raphael's, shipping people, logistics coordinators, a handful of distant relatives who'd shown up out of obligation more than grief, and scattered throughout the crowd were other faces, harder faces, men in suits that cost too much and fit too well, cartel representatives probably, here to make sure Raphael really was dead and not hiding somewhere waiting to resurface and cause more problems. "How long until they move on the shipping business?" Marco asked quietly. 2 weeks, Lucian said. "Maybe less. Raphael's routes were valuable. Someone's going to want them." "You planning to make a play for them?" "No. Let the vultures fight over that. I've got enough complications." Marco glanced at him sidelong. "Speaking of complications, your wife. What about her?" "Word's getting around that you actually care about her. That's making people nervous." "People are always nervous. This is different. You've spent the last 20 years being predictable. Now you're protecting a dead man's daughters and killing people who threaten them. That's not predictable. That's emotional. And emotional makes you vulnerable." Lucian's jaw tightened. "I'm handling it." "Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you're in deeper than you think." "Careful, Marco. I'm serious. You need to think about what happens if this goes sideways. If someone decides to use your wife against you, if the Sinaloa people figure out you were behind Raphael's death, if—" "I said I'm handling it." Marco fell silent. They watched the priest, or whoever the hell that was, finish his eulogy. Watched Isabella place a single white rose on the casket. Watched Sophia break down crying again while Anna held her with stiff, angry arms. The crowd began to disperse. Isabella walked over to where Lucian stood with her sisters trailing behind like ducklings following their mother. Up close, he could see the exhaustion carved into every line of her face. She'd barely slept in the past week. Barely eaten. She was running on fumes and willpower. "Thank you for coming," she said formally, like he was a business associate instead of the man she'd collapsed against in his study. "Of course," Lucian said, matching her tone. Anna was glaring at him with open hostility. Sophia just looked scared. Neither of them had said more than 5 words to him in the past week, despite living in his penthouse. He couldn't blame them. To them, he was the monster their sister had been forced to marry, the dangerous man their father had sold Isabella to. They didn't know he'd killed Raphael, didn't know he'd protected them, didn't know anything except that their world had imploded, and somehow Lucien Moretti was at the center of it. "We should go," Isabella said. "Sophia's exhausted." "I have the car waiting," Lucien said. They walked through the cemetery in silence. The wind picked up, cutting through coats and skin like knives. By the time they reached the black SUV, everyone was shivering. Anna got in first, pulling Sophia with her. Isabella paused with her hand on the door handle. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you regret it, what you did?" Lucien knew she was talking about Raphael, knew she was asking if he felt guilt or remorse or any of the normal human emotions that were supposed to accompany taking a life. "No," he said honestly. Isabella nodded slowly. "Good. Neither do I." She got in the SUV and closed the door. Lucien climbed in beside Marco in the front seat. The driver pulled away from the cemetery, leaving Rafael Valles to rot in the ground where he belonged. 3 days after the funeral, Lucian came home to find Isabella in his study. She was sitting at his desk, his laptop open in front of her, scrolling through files she definitely wasn't supposed to have access to. Financial records, shipping manifests, communications with his lieutenants, everything. Lucien stood in the doorway, watching her read through his entire operation like she was browsing a magazine. "Find anything interesting?" he asked, Isabella didn't jump. Didn't even look guilty. She just kept reading. You're more organized than I expected. I thought criminals kept everything vague and deniable. I keep backups. Makes it harder for people to lie to me. Smart. She finally looked up at him. Did you know my father was planning to steal from you? That got Lucien's attention. Explain. There are messages here from 3 weeks ago. Raphael was negotiating with someone named Esteban about rerouting one of your shipments, skimming product and selling it through a separate channel. She turned the laptop so he could see the screen. He was planning to blame it on the Sinaloa people, make it look like they'd intercepted the shipment. Lucien crossed the room and leaned over her shoulder to read. The messages were there, clear as day. Raphael negotiating terms with one of the cartel's mid-level operators, planning to rob Lucien blind and use the resulting chaos to cover his tracks. Son of a bitch, Lucien breathed. There's more, Isabella said quietly. He was going to have Anna kidnapped too. Not just Sophia, both of them. He figured if the Sinaloa people had leverage over both his daughters, you'd be forced to go to war with the cartel to get them back. And in the confusion, he'd disappear with enough money to start over somewhere else. The rage that had been simmering in Lucien's chest for the past week suddenly exploded into something white-hot and all-consuming. Raphael hadn't just been a coward. He'd been actively trying to destroy everything Lucien had built while using his own daughters as bait. And Lucien had made his death quick, clean, merciful. Why are you showing me this? Lucien asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Isabella closed the laptop and stood up. She was wearing jeans and one of his shirts, black button-down that hung off her frame like a dress. She looked small, fragile, but her eyes were anything but fragile. They were hard, cold, the eyes of someone who'd seen too much and stopped caring about the cost. Because I need you to understand something, she said. I'm not stupid. I know what you do. I know what this life is, and I know that if I'm going to survive in this world, I need to understand how it works. You shouldn't be anywhere near this world. Too late. I'm already in it. We both are. She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of soap on her skin. My father tried to use me as a weapon against you, and I let him, because I didn't know any better, because I was scared and stupid and I believed his lies. But I'm not that person anymore. Isabella Sunko, I'm your wife, she interrupted, which means I'm part of this family now, part of this empire. And if I'm going to be part of it, I need to know everything, how it works, who your enemies are, what threats we're facing, all of it. Lucien stared at her. This was dangerous territory, the kind of territory that got people killed. He'd kept his personal life and his business life separate for 20 years, specifically to avoid complications like this. Women got used as leverage. Families became targets. The moment you let someone see the machinery, they became part of the machinery. But Isabella wasn't asking permission. She was stating facts, and the facts were undeniable. She was already a target, already in danger, already knee-deep in blood and violence, whether she wanted to be or not. Keeping her in the dark wouldn't protect her. It would just make her an easier target. Okay, Lucien said finally. You want in? You're in. But understand something. Once you see how this works, you can't unsee it. Once you know what I do, you become complicit. There's no going back. I know. I mean it, Isabella. This isn't a game. The things I'm going to show you, the things you're going to learn, they'll change you. And not for the better. Good, she said simply. Because the person I was before isn't strong enough to survive here. And I need to survive. For Sophia. For Anna. For myself. Lucien searched her face for doubt. For fear. For any sign that she didn't fully understand what she was asking for. He found nothing but determination. All right, he said. First lesson. Come with me. He led her down to the basement. The same basement where Eddie Reyes had died screaming a week ago. The blood had been cleaned up, but the stains were still there if you knew where to look. Dark patches on the concrete that no amount of bleach could fully erase. Isabella noticed them immediately. What happened here? The man who tried to take Sophia. This is where I interrogated him. She walked over to the largest stain and crouched down, running her fingers over the rough concrete. Did you kill him yourself? No, Marco did. I just asked the questions. And if he hadn't talked? Then I would have made him talk, by any means necessary. Isabella stood up and faced him. Show me. What? Show me how you would have done it, if he'd refused to talk. I need to know. Isabella, that's not… Show me, she insisted. You said, I'm in. That means I need to understand all of it, the good and the bad, especially the bad. Lucian hesitated. This was crossing a line he'd never crossed with anyone. Marco knew what he was capable of because Marco had been there for most of it. But showing Isabella, his wife, his responsibility, the woman who'd sobbed in his arms less than 2 weeks ago, the brutality that underpinned his entire world felt like poison. But she was right. She needed to know. Not knowing would be worse. There's a workbench over there, Lucien said, gesturing to the far wall. Tools, pliers, blowtorch, knives, standard interrogation equipment. Isabella walked over and examined the tools with clinical detachment. She picked up the pliers, tested their weight, set them down, and moved to the blowtorch. How long does it usually take? Depends on the person. Some break immediately. Others hold out for hours. What's the worst you've ever done? Lucian's throat went tight. He thought about the various men who'd ended up in this basement over the years. The screaming, the begging, the way some of them passed out from the pain and had to be revived so the questioning could continue. You don't want to know. Yes, I do. Why? Because I need to know who I married, Isabella said simply. I need to know what you're capable of. No more illusions. No more pretending this is something it's not. So Lucian told her. He told her about the man who'd betrayed him 5 years ago and ended up losing fingers one joint at a time over the course of 6 hours. About the informant who'd sold information to the feds and had his teeth pulled out with pliers before being drowned in a bathtub. About the rival captain who'd tried to move in on Moretti territory and ended up begging for death by the time Lucian was finished with him. He told her everything, every brutal detail, every moment of violence that had built his reputation and kept his empire intact. Isabella listened without flinching, without crying, without any visible reaction at all. She just stood there absorbing it like she was taking notes for a class. When he finished, she said, "Thank you for being honest with me." That doesn't bother you? Of course it bothers me, but I'd rather know the truth than live in ignorance. She walked back over to him. And I need you to promise me something. What? If anyone ever comes after my sisters again, I want you to do to them what you did to those men. I want you to make them suffer. I want them to regret every choice that led them to my family. Can you promise me that? The request should have shocked him, should have made him pull back and reconsider everything. But looking at Isabella standing there in his borrowed shirt, her eyes hard and her jaw set, Lucian realized she understood exactly what she was asking for. She wasn't asking him to be a hero. She was asking him to be a monster on her behalf. I promise, he said. Isabella nodded once. Then she kissed him. It wasn't tentative or uncertain. It was fierce, desperate. The kiss of someone who'd been holding back for too long and finally decided to let go. Lucien responded automatically, his hands moving to her waist, pulling her closer. She tasted like coffee and something darker, like decisions that couldn't be unmade and lines that had already been crossed. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. I'm not ready for more than that, Isabella said quietly. Not yet, but I needed you to know that I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Not because I have to, because I want to. Okay, Lucien managed. Okay. She stepped back, putting distance between them again. Now show me the rest. I want to see everything. Over the next 3 weeks, Isabella became a student of violence. Lucien showed her the books. The real books. Not the sanitized versions his accountants kept for tax purposes. She learned how money flowed through shell corporations and offshore accounts, how shipments were routed through legitimate businesses to hide their true nature, how bribes were paid and favors were traded and the entire system was held together by fear and mutual benefit. She sat in on meetings with his captains, watched them negotiate territory and settle disputes, learned their names, their weaknesses, their ambitions. She was quiet during these meetings, observing more than participating, but Lucien could see the gears turning in her head, processing, analyzing, filing away information for later use. Marco didn't like it. "You're making a mistake," he told Lucian after one particularly tense meeting where Isabella had sat in the corner taking mental notes. "She's a liability. She's my wife. She's a 22-year-old kid who's in way over her head. And when this blows up, and it will blow up, you're going to have to choose between protecting her and protecting the business. It won't come to that." "It always comes to that," Marco said grimly. But Marco didn't understand. Isabella wasn't a liability. She was adapting, learning, becoming something harder and more dangerous than the frightened girl who'd stood at the altar 6 weeks ago. Her sisters were adapting too. Sophia had started therapy, twice-weekly sessions with a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. She was still having nightmares, still jumping at loud noises. But she was getting better, slowly. Anna was a different story. She'd enrolled in community college and was taking business classes, but she spent most of her time locked in her room or wandering the penthouse like a ghost. She blamed Lucien for everything. For Raphael's death, for the danger they were in, for the fact that their mother had abandoned them to pills and bitterness. Isabella tried to bridge the gap between them, but Anna wasn't having it. "He's a criminal," Anna had said during one particularly explosive argument that Lucien overheard from his study. "He kills people for a living, and you're just going to pretend that's okay?" "I'm not pretending anything," Isabella shot back. "I'm surviving. Same as you, same as Sophia, and whether you like it or not, Lucien is the reason we're still alive. Dad would still be alive if it wasn't for him. Dad would be dead anyway. Or we would be. Or both. Lucien didn't create this mess. Dad did." The argument had ended with Anna storming off and slamming her door hard enough to rattle the walls. Isabella had stood in the hallway for a long time after that, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Lucien had found her later that night on the balcony, staring out at the city lights. The temperature had dropped into the 20s, but she wasn't wearing a coat, just a thin sweater and jeans. "You're going to freeze out here," Lucien said, draping his coat over her shoulders. "I don't feel it," Isabella said distantly. "Anna will come around." "No, she won't. She's right to hate me. I chose this. I chose you, and that makes me complicit in everything that happens from here on out." "You're not complicit. You're surviving." "Same thing," Isabella said. She turned to look at him. "Do you ever regret it? The choices you've made? The things you've done?" "Every day. But you keep doing them anyway. Because the alternative is worse. Because if I stop, everything I've built collapses. And everyone who depends on me gets hurt." Isabella was quiet for a moment. Then, "I killed my father. We've been over this. No," she interrupted. "I mean, I literally killed him. I cut the brake lines myself." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Lucien grabbed the railing to steady himself. "What?" "The night before it happened. I went down to the parking garage where he kept his car. Marco had given me the tools and showed me what to do. Said you'd ordered him to handle it, but I told him I wanted to do it myself, and he let me." Lucien's mind was racing. Marco hadn't mentioned any of this. Hadn't said a word about Isabella being involved. "Why?" "Because I needed to know if I could do it. If I could actually cross that line and not just talk about it." Isabella's voice was steady, cold. "And I could. I did. I cut those lines and I watched him drive away the next morning and I waited for the call. And when it came, all I felt was relief." "Jesus Christ, Isabella. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know who you're married to, what I'm capable of." She pulled his coat tighter around herself. "I'm not the victim you thought I was. I'm not some innocent thing that needs to be protected. I'm a killer, just like you." Lucien didn't know what to say. Every instinct screamed at him to push back, to tell her she was wrong, that one act of violence didn't define her entire existence. But looking at her standing there in the cold with her jaw set and her eyes clear, he realized she'd already made peace with what she'd done. She wasn't looking for absolution. She was looking for understanding. "Okay," Lucien said finally. "Okay? You're a killer. So am I. Welcome to the family." Isabella's laugh was sharp and brittle. "That's it? No moral lecture? No attempt to save my soul?" "Your soul's your own business. I'm not equipped to save anyone's soul, especially not my own." She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her body despite the cold. "I'm falling for you. You know that, right?" The admission hit him like a punch to the sternum. Isabella, I know I shouldn't. I know this whole thing is fucked up and toxic and probably going to end badly, but I can't help it. You're the first person in my entire life who's treated me like I have value beyond what I can provide. And I don't know how to not fall for that. Lucien wanted to tell her that she was wrong, that he treated her like a transaction at first, just like everyone else, that he'd only started caring when it became strategically necessary. But those things felt less true every day. Somewhere along the way, Isabella had stopped being a complication and started being something else. Something that mattered. I'm falling for you too, he admitted quietly. Even knowing what I did? Especially knowing what you did. Isabella kissed him again. This time it was slower, deeper, less desperate, and more certain. When they broke apart, she said, I'm still not ready for everything, but I'm getting there. Take all the time you need. And if someone comes for us, if the Sinaloa people figure out what happened, if your enemies decide I'm a good target, then I'll burn the world down to keep you safe. Promise? Promise. They stood there on the balcony for a long time, two killers finding comfort in each other's darkness, while the city sprawled below them like a living thing made of light and shadows and broken promises. The next morning, everything went to hell. Lucien was in a meeting with his accountant when Marco burst into the study without knocking. His face was ashen. We've got a problem. Not now, Lucien said. Now. Marco's tone left no room for argument. The Sinaloa people just picked up 2 of our shipments at the port. They're claiming Rafael owed them more than we thought. They're saying his debt transfers to you through the marriage. The accountant was smart enough to leave without being told. As soon as the door closed behind him, Lucien was on his feet. How much? 8 million. 8? Lucien bit off the curse. Rafael's debt was 3 million. Where the hell are they getting 8? Interest. Penalties for late payment. The cost of the product he lost. They're saying Rafael had been stalling for 6 months. Now they want everything he owed plus damages. And if I don't pay, they'll consider it a declaration of war. Lucien's hands clenched into fists. Rafael's ghost was still causing problems even from the grave. When do they want the money? End of the week. That's 4 days. I'm aware. Lucien started pacing. 8 million was manageable. Painful, but manageable. But paying it would set a precedent. Every cartel with a grudge would start coming after him, claiming some old debt or perceived slight. It would make him look weak. But not paying meant war. The kind of war that would spill blood in the streets and draw federal attention and potentially destroy everything he'd built. There's more, Marco said grimly. They know about Isabella. Everything inside Lucien went cold. How much do they know? Enough. They know she's Rafael's daughter. They know she's living here. And they're suggesting that if you can't pay the debt in cash, you could always return the collateral. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. They wanted Isabella. Lucien's vision went red at the edges. Over my dead body. That can be arranged, Marco said quietly. You need to think about this strategically. 8 million or a war. Those are your options. There's a third option, which is I kill everyone involved and make it clear that my wife is off limits. Permanently. Marco's face went carefully neutral. You're talking about going to war with the Sinaloa cartel over a woman you've known for 6 weeks. I'm talking about protecting my family. She's not your family. She's a transaction that went bad. And if you can't separate your emotions from business decisions, you're going to get us all killed. Lucien grabbed Marco by the front of his shirt and slammed him against the wall. Say that again. Marco didn't flinch. You're letting your dick do your thinking, and it's going to cost us everything. She's my wife. She's a liability. And the longer you pretend otherwise, the weaker you look. Marco's voice dropped. I've been with you for 20 years. I've watched you build this empire from nothing, and I'm telling you right now, if you go to war over this girl, you're going to lose. Not because you're not strong enough, because you're not thinking clearly. Lucien released him and stepped back. His hands were shaking with barely controlled rage. What do you suggest? Pay the debt. Take the hit. Move on. And when they come back asking for more, we deal with it then. But right now, you need to stop the bleeding before it gets worse. Lucien wanted to argue, wanted to tell Marco that paying the Sinaloa people was the same as admitting weakness. But the logical part of his brain, the part that had kept him alive for 20 years, knew Marco was right. Fine, Lucien said through gritted teeth. Arrange the payment. And the girl? What about her? You need to put some distance there. She's making you sloppy. She stays. She stays, Lucien repeated. That's not negotiable. Marco shook his head slowly. This is a mistake. Then it's my mistake to make. Marco left without another word. Lucien stood alone in his study, trying to get his heart rate under control. 8 million. That was what Raphael's lies had cost him. $8 million and a target painted on Isabella's back. He needed to tell her. He found her in the library with Sophia, reading aloud from some children's book about dragons and princesses. Sophia was curled up against her side, eyes half closed, one hand clutching Isabella's shirt like an anchor. It was a scene of pure domesticity, the kind of thing that shouldn't exist in Lucien's violent world, but somehow did anyway. Isabella looked up when he entered. She must have seen something in his face because her expression immediately shifted from calm to alert. Sophia, why don't you go work on your homework? I need to talk to Lucien. Sophia grumbled but complied, dragging herself off the couch and wandering toward her room. As soon as she was gone, Isabella was on her feet. What happened? The Sinaloa people know about you. They're claiming your father's debt transferred to me through our marriage. They want $8 million, or they want you. Isabella went very still. How much time do we have? 4 days. Are you going to pay them? Yes. And if they come back asking for more? We'll deal with it when it happens. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, There's another option. No. You don't even know what I'm going to say. I know exactly what you're going to say, and the answer is no. You're not turning yourself over to them. It would solve the problem. It would get you killed. Maybe, Isabella said calmly. Or maybe they'd use me as leverage. Keep me alive to make sure you stay in line. Either way, it would protect Sophia and Anna. And isn't that what matters? Lucien crossed the room and grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me very carefully. I am not trading you to save $8 million. I am not trading you to avoid a war. I am not trading you for any reason. Do you understand? But no buts. You're mine. That means you're under my protection, and anyone who tries to take you will have to go through me first. Isabella's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Why are you doing this? Why are you risking everything for me? Because, Lucien said, and realized the truth as he said it, you're not a transaction anymore. You're not a complication or a liability or a strategic asset. You're just you. And I'll be damned if I let anyone hurt you. A single tear slid down Isabella's cheek. I think I love you. The word should have terrified him. Should have made him pull back and reassess and put distance between them like Marco had suggested. But standing there with his hands on her shoulders and her eyes searching his face for something real, Lucien discovered he was tired of running from things that mattered. I think I love you too, he said. Isabella kissed him. This time, when they broke apart, she whispered, I'm ready. For everything. If you are. Lucien's heart was pounding. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed her again, and this time, when the kiss deepened, he lifted her into his arms and carried her out of the library, past the study, past the living room where his men were stationed, up the stairs to the master bedroom he hadn't used in weeks. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and for the first time since their wedding night, Lucien and Isabella became husband and wife in more than just name. They lay tangled together afterward, sheets twisted around their bodies, both breathing hard. Isabella's head rested on Lucien's chest. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her back. That was... Isabella started, then stopped. Yeah, Lucien agreed. She laughed, soft and real, very articulate. I'm out of practice. Could have fooled me. They fell into comfortable silence. Outside, night had fallen. The city lights glittered beyond the windows like stars brought down to earth. Lucien felt more at peace than he had in years. It wouldn't last. He knew that. Peace never lasted in his world. But for this moment, he had her, and that was enough. Isabella shifted slightly, propping herself up on one elbow to look at him. What happens now? Now I pay the Sinaloa people. Make it clear you're off limits, and hope they're smart enough to take the message. And if they're not, then we go to war. Just like that? Just like that? Isabella was quiet for a moment, then, I want to help. Help how? I don't know yet, but I'm done being a bystander. This is my life too, my family. If there's going to be a war, I want to be part of it. Isabella, I mean it. You said I was in, that I was part of this family. So let me prove it. Let me be useful. Lucien studied her face in the dim light. She was serious, determined. The frightened girl from their wedding night was completely gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who'd killed her own father and carried the weight without crumbling. Someone dangerous. Okay, he said finally, but you follow my lead. You don't take risks I don't approve. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. She sealed the promise with a kiss. Lucien pulled her closer, savoring the warmth of her body against his, trying to memorize this moment before the world intruded again. Because the world always intruded, and the storm that was coming would test everything they'd built together. Starting tomorrow. The money was supposed to buy them time. Lucien had arranged the transfer himself. $8 million moved through 3 different shell companies and 2 offshore accounts before landing in a numbered deposit box in the Cayman Islands. Clean, untraceable. Exactly the kind of transaction the Sinaloa people preferred because it kept everyone's hands looking pristine, while blood money changed ownership beneath the surface. Marco had delivered the confirmation codes personally, meeting with a cartel representative in a neutral location, a shipping warehouse near the docks where neither side had territorial advantage. The meeting had lasted 12 minutes. No threats, no posturing, just business conducted with the cold efficiency of professionals who understood that some debts were better paid than fought over. Lucien had watched the whole thing through surveillance feeds, his jaw tight, with barely controlled rage at having to surrender that much money over a dead man's lies. But he'd swallowed the anger because Isabella was worth more than $8 million, because her sisters deserved to sleep without nightmares, because for the first time in his violent life, something mattered more than pride or profit or maintaining appearances. That had been 3 days ago, 3 days of careful peace where Lucien started to believe they might actually escape Raphael's shadow. 3 days where Isabella smiled more easily and Sophia stopped flinching at sudden movements, and even Anna began to thaw slightly, joining them for dinner instead of hiding in her room. 3 days of pretending the world might actually let them have something good. Then Marco walked into Lucien's study at 2 a.m. with blood on his shirt and devastation carved into every line of his face. They took her, Marco said without preamble. Lucien's brain refused to process the words. They sat there in his consciousness like foreign objects his mind kept trying to reject. What? Isabella. They took her 40 minutes ago, right out of the fucking penthouse. The world tilted sideways. Lucien grabbed the edge of his desk to keep from falling. That's impossible. We have 30 men stationed in this building. Every entrance is monitored. Every floor is... They had help from the inside. Marco's voice was flat. Dead. Someone disabled the cameras on the residential floors. Someone unlocked the private elevator. Someone gave them a clear path straight to her. Who? I don't know yet. But they knew exactly where she'd be. Knew she'd be alone. Knew when your guards would be changing shifts. Marco's hands were shaking. This was planned, carefully, by someone who knows how we operate. Lucien's mind was racing through possibilities, discarding them as fast as they appeared. His security was airtight. Every man had been vetted personally. Every access point was redundant. The idea that someone could just walk in and take Isabella was... His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Video message. Lucien's hands were steadier than they should have been as he opened the file. The video was short, 20 seconds. Grainy footage shot in what looked like an empty warehouse. Isabella was tied to a chair in the center of the frame, her face bruised, her lips split and bleeding. She was conscious, but barely, her head lolling forward like staying upright required more strength than she possessed. A man's voice spoke from off-camera, accented English, professional, cold. You have 24 hours to deliver the real payment, not the money you sent. The real payment, you know what we want. The video ended. Lucien watched it 3 more times, his brain cataloging every detail. The way Isabella's hands were bound with zip ties, the dark stain on her shirt that might have been blood, the industrial shelving visible in the background, the sound of water dripping somewhere beyond the camera's range. The real payment, Lucien repeated quietly. What the fuck does that mean? Marco was silent for a long moment. Too long. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. There was never any $8 million debt. What? Raphael didn't owe the Sinaloa people $8 million. He owed them 3. The rest was... Marco couldn't finish the sentence. The rest was what? Lucien's voice came out deadly quiet. A test. To see if you'd pay. To see how much she was worth to you. The implications crashed over Lucien like a tidal wave. The cartel hadn't been settling a debt. They'd been measuring his weakness, calculating how much leverage Isabella represented, and he'd shown them exactly how much power she had over him by emptying his accounts without hesitation. He'd painted a target on her back with his own desperation to protect her. Who authorized this? Lucien asked. I don't know. Marco, who authorized the test? Marco's face was ashen. It came through regular channels. The representative I met with had proper credentials, proper codes. Everything checked out. Then someone on the inside fed them those credentials, someone with high-level access to our communication networks. Lucien's mind was already running through the short list of people who had that kind of clearance. Marco, 3 of his oldest captains, his accountant, and his blood went cold. Where's Vincent? Lucien asked. Vincent Calabrese. Marco's younger brother. One of Lucien's most trusted lieutenants. The man who'd been in charge of security for the penthouse for the past 5 years. The man who would have known exactly when the guards changed shifts. Marco's face went from ashen to gray. No, Jesus Christ, no, he wouldn't. Where is he? I don't know. He was supposed to check in an hour ago, but Marco pulled out his phone and made a call. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. Fuck, he's not answering. Lucien was already moving, pulling up security feeds on his laptop. He scrolled back through the footage from the past 6 hours, looking for Vincent's face. Found him leaving the building at 11:43. 23 minutes before Isabella was taken. Pull his phone records, Lucien ordered. His financials, every communication he's had in the past month. I want to know who he's been talking to and how much they paid him. Luce, my brother wouldn't... Your brother just sold my wife to the fucking cartels. Lucien slammed his fist into the desk hard enough that wood cracked. So either you help me find him, or you get the fuck out of my way. Marco looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. If he did this, if Vincent really did this, then he's a dead man, same as anyone else who touches her. He's my brother, and she's my wife. Lucien's voice dropped to something dangerous, something that made Marco take an involuntary step backward. 20 years, Marco. 20 years you've been with me. But if you make me choose between finding Isabella and protecting your family, I will choose her every single time. Do you understand? Marco stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. I understand. Good. Then make the call. Find Vincent, and when you do, bring him to me alive. I want to hear him explain this before I kill him. Fog. The interrogation of Marco's contacts took 4 hours and yielded 3 dead ends and 1 solid lead. A mid-level enforcer named Carlos, who'd been seen drinking with Vincent 2 weeks ago at a bar in Little Village. Carlos worked for the Sinaloa people, but he also freelanced, selling information, arranging meetings, facilitating deals between organizations that preferred to keep their hands clean. Marco found Carlos at a gambling den on the south side, dragged him out by his throat while he was 3 hands deep into a poker game, and threw him into the back of an SUV. 20 minutes later, Carlos was zip-tied to a chair in the same basement where Eddie Reyes had died, blood streaming from his nose, where Marco had introduced his face to the concrete. Lucien stood in front of him, his hands in his pockets, his expression calm. Almost pleasant. The calm before a hurricane. I'm going to ask you one question, Lucien said quietly, and depending on your answer, you either walk out of here or you don't. Understand? Carlos nodded frantically. Where is my wife? I don't know, man. I swear to God, I don't... Lucien's fist connected with Carlos's jaw hard enough that the chair tipped backward and crashed to the floor. Carlos screamed. Lucien grabbed the chair and hauled it upright again, his knuckles already splitting and bleeding. "Wrong answer," Lucien said. "Try again. Where is my wife?" "They didn't tell me where they were taking her. I just set up the meet between Vincent and the Sinaloa people. I didn't know what it was about." "You're lying." "I'm not. I swear. Vincent came to me 3 weeks ago asking for a contact, said he had information to sell. I connected him with Miguel Reyes. That's all I did." Miguel Reyes. Lucien knew the name. Sinaloa enforcer. High-level operator who specialized in kidnapping and extortion. The kind of man who made people disappear when negotiations failed. Where would Miguel take her? "I don't know. He has like 10 different safe houses around the city. Could be any of them." Marco stepped forward. "Give me addresses." "I don't have addresses. Miguel doesn't trust people with that kind of information." "You think he tells guys like me where he keeps his prisoners?" Lucien pulled a knife from his belt. The blade caught the dim basement light and threw shadows across Carlos's face. "Then you're not useful to me anymore." "Wait! Wait!" Carlos was hyperventilating now, his eyes locked on the knife. "There's a guy, Tommy Chen. He handles logistics for Miguel, secures locations, handles transportation. If anyone knows where they took your wife, it's Tommy." "Where do I find Tommy?" "He runs a chop shop in Chinatown, Red Dragon Auto, but you can't just walk in there. Miguel has people watching. If you come in loud, they'll kill her before you get through the door." Lucien pressed the tip of the knife against Carlos's throat, just hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. "If you're lying to me, I will find you, and what I do to you will make this conversation look like a pleasant afternoon. Understood?" "I'm not lying, I swear on my mother's grave." Lucien studied his face for another long moment. Then he removed the knife and nodded to Marco. "Cut him loose." Marco hesitated. "You're letting him go?" "He gave us what we needed, and if he's lying, I know where to find him." Lucien looked at Carlos one more time. "If I were you, I'd leave Chicago tonight, because if Isabella dies, everyone who had anything to do with this is going to follow her. Understand?" Carlos nodded frantically. Marco cut the zip ties, and Carlos stumbled toward the stairs, moving as fast as his shaking legs would carry him. As soon as he was gone, Marco turned to Lucien. "We need a plan. If Miguel has her in a fortified location, I don't care if he has her in fucking Fort Knox. I'm getting her back. And Vincent is a problem for after we find Isabella. Right now, he's secondary. He's my brother." "I know." Lucien's voice softened slightly. "And when this is over, we'll deal with it. But right now, I need you focused. Can you do that?" Marco's jaw worked. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Finally, he nodded. "Yeah, I can do that." "Good. Then get me everything you can find on Tommy Chen and Red Dragon Auto. Building layouts, security systems, employee schedules. I want to know every entrance and every exit before we go in." "How long do we have?" Lucien checked his watch. 17 hours since the video. "Not long enough." Desank. Red Dragon Auto occupied a squat brick building wedged between a dim sum restaurant and a laundromat in the heart of Chinatown. The front looked legitimate enough. Cars in various states of repair, a faded sign advertising bodywork and paint jobs, fluorescent lights visible through grimy windows. But the back was where the real business happened. Stolen vehicles stripped for parts. VINs filed off and replaced. Engines swapped. The kind of operation that existed because people asked the right questions and paid the right bribes to make sure nobody looked too closely. Tommy Chen was there at 9 in the morning when Lucien and Marco arrived with 4 of Lucien's most trusted men. No massive assault team, no overwhelming force, just 6 people who knew how to move quietly and kill efficiently. They came in through the back, bypassing the main entrance where Tommy's people would be watching. Marco picked the lock on the rear door while Lucien covered him with a suppressed pistol. Inside, the shop smelled like motor oil and cigarette smoke and something darker. Rust and old blood and fear. 2 men were working on a black Mercedes with no plates. They looked up when the door opened, looked at the guns, started reaching for their own weapons. Lucien shot them both before they could draw. 2 clean headshots. suppressed rounds that sounded like violent coughs in the enclosed space. Both men dropped without a sound. "Clear the building," Lucian ordered quietly. His men moved through the shop like ghosts. 60 seconds later, 3 more of Tommy's people were dead, and the rest of the building was secured. Tommy himself was in a back office, feet up on a desk covered in paperwork and cash, talking on his phone in rapid Cantonese. He saw Lucian in the doorway and went very still. "I'm going to have to call you back," Tommy said into the phone. He set it down carefully, raised his hands slowly. "Lucien Moretti, to what do I owe the—" Lucian shot him in the knee. Tommy screamed and toppled out of his chair, clutching his leg. Blood poured between his fingers and pooled on the concrete floor. "You fucking psycho! You can't just—" Lucian shot him in the other knee. More screaming. Tommy was writhing on the floor now, both legs destroyed, his face twisted in agony. Marco stood in the doorway looking vaguely sick but not intervening. Lucien crouched down beside Tommy, his gun held loosely in one hand. "Miguel Reyes kidnapped my wife. You handle logistics for Miguel, which means you know where he's keeping her. So you're going to tell me, right now, or I'm going to keep shooting you in non-lethal places until you do." "I don't know what you're talking about," Tommy gasped through the pain. Lucien shot him in the shoulder. Tommy's scream echoed off the walls. He was crying now, tears and snot streaming down his face. Okay, Jesus Christ, okay. Where is she?" "Warehouse on the docks, Pier 17. Miguel keeps a shipping container there. Uses it for people he needs to keep quiet." "How many guards?" 6? Maybe 8? I don't know exactly." "Is she alive?" "Last I heard, yeah. Miguel wants to keep her that way until the exchange happens." "What exchange?" Tommy's face went even paler. "I don't know. They didn't tell me the details, just that there was going to be an exchange. Your wife for something. For something. Not someone. Something." Lucian's blood ran cold. "What did Vincent promise them?" "I don't know, I swear. Miguel doesn't share that kind of information with people like me. I just handle the locations and the transportation." Lucian stood up, pressed his gun against Tommy's forehead. "If you're lying, if we get to that warehouse and she's not there, or she's dead, or this is a trap—" "It's not a trap, she's there. I swear on my life." "Your life is worth considerably less than you think." Lucien pulled the trigger. Tommy's body jerked once and went still. Blood spread across the concrete in a slow-growing puddle. Marco was staring at the body. "He talked. He gave you what you wanted. He helped them take her. That's a death sentence." "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly. Everyone who had a hand in this dies. No exceptions. No mercy." Lucian turned to face Marco directly. "Including Vincent." Marco's face was carved from stone. "He's my brother, and he betrayed me. Betrayed all of us. Sold Isabella to the cartels for money or power, or whatever the fuck they offered him." Lucian's voice was ice. "When we find him, he dies. That's not negotiable. Let me talk to him first. Let me find out why. I don't care why. I care that he did it, and the price for that is his life." They stared at each other across Tommy's corpse. 20 years of partnership and loyalty hanging in the balance. Marco's hands were clenched into fists. His breathing was harsh. For a moment, Lucian thought he might actually swing. Then Marco's shoulders sagged. "Do what you have to do, but I'm not pulling the trigger. I can't." "I'm not asking you to. I'll handle it myself." Marco nodded slowly, turned and walked out of the office without another word. But Pier 17 was a graveyard of shipping containers stacked like rusted dominoes against the skeletal remains of industrial cranes that hadn't moved cargo in decades. The whole area smelled like dead fish and diesel fuel in decay. Perfect place to keep someone you didn't want found. Lucian and his team approached from the waterside, using a small boat to reach the pier without triggering any lookouts posted on the main access roads. It was 3 in the afternoon. Broad daylight. Not ideal conditions for a rescue operation, but they were out of time. The 24-hour deadline was approaching fast. Marco had wanted to bring more men, wanted to plan a proper assault with multiple entry points and contingencies for every possible outcome. But Lucien had overruled him. Too many people meant too much noise, meant too many chances for something to go wrong, meant Isabella might die in the crossfire while they were busy being tactical. So it was just the six of them again, moving through the maze of containers like shadows, looking for the one that held his wife. They found it near the back of the pier, a red shipping container with the doors padlocked, and two guards stationed outside smoking cigarettes and looking bored. Through gaps in the container's walls, Lucien could hear muffled sounds. Movement. Someone breathing hard. Isabella. The rage that had been simmering in Lucien's chest for the past 20 hours suddenly exploded into something white-hot and all-consuming. He signaled his men to spread out, silent hand gestures laying out the plan, no words needed. They'd done this kind of thing before. On his signal, they moved. The two guards died within seconds, suppressed rounds to the head. Their bodies crumpled to the ground without a sound. Marco moved forward with bolt cutters and severed the padlock. The container doors swung open with a rusty shriek. Inside was darkness. And Isabella. She was chained to a support beam in the center of the container, her wrists rubbed raw from the restraints. Her face was worse than it had looked in the video, swollen and bruised, one eye nearly swollen shut, dried blood crusting her split lip. Her shirt was torn. Fresh bruises covered her exposed skin. They'd beaten her. Worse than beaten her. Lucien felt something fundamental break inside his chest. "Isabella," he said hoarsely. Her head lifted slowly. The one good eye focused on him with difficulty. For a moment, she didn't seem to recognize him. Then her face crumpled. "Lucien?" He crossed the container in 3 strides and grabbed her face gently, checking her pupils, cataloging the damage. "I'm here. You're okay. You're going to be okay." "They said..." Her voice was barely a whisper. "They said you weren't coming, that you'd chosen the money instead. Fuck the money. Fuck all of it." Lucien was working on the chains, his hands shaking with a combination of rage and relief. "Did they?" "No." She understood what he was asking. "They hit me, scared me. But they didn't. They were waiting for something. Someone." The chains finally gave way. Isabella collapsed forward into Lucien's arms. He caught her, cradling her against his chest like she might shatter. She was shaking. Or he was. Maybe both. "We need to move," Marco said from the doorway. "More guards will be coming soon." Lucien stood, lifting Isabella with him. She weighed nothing, like the past day had hollowed her out from the inside. "Can you walk?" "I think so." He set her down carefully, her legs nearly buckled, but she caught herself against the container wall. "I can walk." They moved back through the maze of containers, faster now but still careful. Isabella stumbled several times but refused to let Lucien carry her, stubborn even in pain, even in trauma. They were 50 feet from the boat when gunfire erupted behind them. Lucien shoved Isabella behind a container and returned fire. 3 men had appeared from between the stacks, assault rifles spitting rounds that sparked off metal and concrete. One of Lucien's men went down with a scream, then another. Marco was firing controlled bursts, forcing the attackers into cover. "We need to move now!" "Go!" Lucien ordered. "Get her to the boat!" Marco grabbed Isabella and started pulling her toward the water. Lucien and his remaining men provided covering fire, falling back in coordinated movements, laying down enough bullets to keep the attackers pinned. They made it to the boat. Isabella was already inside, curled up in the bottom with her arms wrapped around her knees. Marco started the engine. The remaining men piled in. Lucien was about to follow when he saw movement on the pier, a figure standing between 2 containers. Watching. Vincent. Their eyes met across 50 yards of rusted metal and salt-corroded concrete. Vincent's face was unreadable. He didn't raise a weapon, didn't move, just stood there like a ghost waiting to see if Lucien would acknowledge him. "Luce!" Marco shouted. "We need to go!" Lucien could have shot Vincent from here, could have ended it with 1 bullet, put a period on 20 years of loyalty betrayed in the span of 3 weeks. Instead, he turned and jumped into the boat. Marco gunned the engine and they pulled away from the pier. Gunfire chased them across the water, but the distance was too great now. The rounds fell short, splashing into the harbor like angry raindrops. Lucien sat down beside Isabella and pulled her into his arms. She was crying silently, her whole body shaking with shock and exhaustion and relief. He held her tight enough that he could feel her heartbeat against his chest. Proof that she was real, that she was alive, that he'd gotten her back. I've got you, he whispered into her hair. You're safe now. But even as he said it, Lucien knew it was a lie, because Vincent was still alive, and whatever he'd promised the Sinaloa people in exchange for setting this up was still out there waiting to detonate. They took Isabella straight to a private medical facility that Lucien kept on retainer for situations where hospitals asked too many questions. A doctor examined her while Lucien paced the hallway outside, his hands still covered in Tommy Chen's blood, his mind racing through contingencies and consequences, and the growing certainty that this wasn't over. Marco stood against the opposite wall, silent. His face was gray, exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that came from choosing between family and knowing there was no right answer. I need to find him, Marco said finally. I know. Before you do. Marco. Please. The word came out broken, raw. Let me talk to him first. Let me understand why he did this. Then you can do whatever you need to do. Lucien wanted to say no. Wanted to tell Marco that Vincent had forfeited the right to explanations when he sold Isabella to the cartels. But looking at his oldest friend standing there with devastation carved into every line of his face, Lucien found he couldn't. 24 hours, Lucien said quietly. You have 24 hours to find him and get answers. After that, I'm hunting him myself. And when I find him, there won't be any conversation, just an ending. Marco nodded. Thank yous. He left without another word. Lucien stood alone in the hallway, listening to the muffled voices of the doctor and Isabella talking in the examination room, checking injuries, documenting damage, adding to the ledger of violence that seemed to follow them wherever they went. The door opened. The doctor emerged, pulling off latex gloves. She's going to be fine. Bruised ribs, possible concussion, dehydration, but nothing permanent. Can I see her? She's asking for you. Lucien went inside. Isabella was sitting on the examination table in a hospital gown, her feet dangling off the edge. Without the torn clothes and the layers of grime, she looked younger, more fragile, like the girl she'd been on their wedding night instead of the woman she'd become. Hey, she said softly. Hey. Lucien crossed the room and stood in front of her. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. She tried to smile. It came out crooked because of the split lip. But I'm alive. That's something. It's everything. Isabella reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold. They kept asking me questions about you, about your operation, about who you worked with, and how money moved through the organization. I didn't tell them anything. I know you didn't. How do you know? Because if you had, they wouldn't have kept you alive. You were only valuable as long as you had information to trade. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Vincent set this up, didn't he? Lucien didn't insult her by lying. Yes. Why? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. And then you're going to kill him. Yes. Isabella squeezed his hand tighter. Good. I want him dead. I want everyone who did this dead. And I want to be there when it happens. Isabella, I mean it. They took me from our home, beat me, chained me like an animal, and they did it because one of your own people betrayed you. Her voice was shaking, but her eyes were clear, hard. I want to watch them die. Every single one of them. Lucien should have argued, should have told her that revenge wouldn't heal the damage or erase the trauma or make her feel whole again. But looking at Isabella sitting there with bruises covering her body and murder in her eyes, he realized she'd already crossed the same line he'd crossed years ago. The line between victim and killer. The line that, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. Okay, he said simply. Okay? When I find them, you can be there. You can watch. And if you want to pull the trigger yourself, I'll hand you the gun. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. For what? For not trying to protect me from this. For not treating me like I'm too fragile to handle the truth. She pulled him closer until their foreheads touched. Everyone else in my life has tried to shield me from reality. But you let me see it all. Even the ugly parts, especially the ugly parts. The ugly parts are all I have. That's not true. You have me, and Sophia, and Anna, and whatever fucked up family we're building together. She kissed him gently, careful of her split lip. That's not ugly. That's just complicated. Lucien wanted to believe her, wanted to think that they could build something real out of the wreckage of the past 2 months. But standing there in that examination room with Isabella's blood still staining his shirt and Vincent's betrayal still burning in his chest, he couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still coming. That whatever Vincent had promised the cartels in exchange for helping them kidnap Isabella was about to land on them like a bomb. And when it did, none of them would survive intact. The call came 6 hours later. Lucien was back at the penthouse with Isabella, watching her sleep in their bed while he sat in a chair by the window with a loaded gun in his lap. Just in case. Anna and Sophia were in their rooms under guard. The entire building was locked down tighter than a federal prison. His phone buzzed, Marco's name on the screen. Lucien answered. Tell me. I found him. Marco's voice was hollow. Dead. You need to come to the warehouse district, south side, building 47. Is he alive? For now? Keep him that way. I'm coming. Lucien hung up, looked at Isabella sleeping, debated waking her, decided against it. She needed rest more than she needed to be there for this. He left instructions with his men to guard her with their lives. Then he took Marco's brother, one of his most loyal soldiers, and drove to the warehouse district. Building 47 was a gutted concrete shell that used to manufacture automotive parts before the recession killed it. Now it was just another corpse slowly rotting in Chicago's industrial graveyard. Marco was waiting inside with Vincent. Vincent was on his knees in the center of the empty space, his hands zip-tied behind his back, his face bruised but not destroyed. Marco stood behind him with a gun pressed against the back of his brother's head. The scene was a tableau of broken loyalty. Lucien walked forward slowly, his footsteps echoing off concrete and exposed steel. He stopped 5 feet from Vincent and just looked at him. Vincent met his eyes without flinching. I'm sorry. Sorry? The word came out flat, emotionless. You sold my wife to the cartels and you're sorry? I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, not when they have your daughter. Vincent's voice cracked. They have Elena. They've had her for 3 weeks. Said if I didn't help them get leverage over you, they'd kill her. I didn't know what else to do. The words hung in the air like smoke. Elena. Vincent's 8-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. The little girl with pigtails and gap-toothed smiles that Vincent carried pictures of in his wallet. Lucien felt the foundations of his rage shift slightly. Not disappearing, just complicating. Why didn't you come to me? Because they said if I told anyone, they'd know. They had people watching, listening. I couldn't risk it. So you risked Isabella instead. I thought, Vincent's voice broke completely. I thought you'd be able to get her back. I thought you were strong enough to handle it. And I thought if I did what they asked, they'd let Elena go and everyone would survive. And did they? Let her go? Vincent's silence was answer enough. Where is she? Lucien asked quietly. I don't know. They said they'd release her once the exchange happened. Once they got what they wanted. Which is what? You. Vincent looked up at him with haunted eyes. They don't want money. They want you. Dead or under their control. They figured if they had Isabella, they could force you into a position where you'd have to choose between saving her and saving yourself. And either way, they win. The final piece clicked into place. The kidnapping hadn't been about ransom or leverage or settling old debts. It had been about removing Lucien from the board entirely, taking out the one person who'd been blocking the Sinaloa cartel from expanding into his territory. Vincent had just been the weapon they'd used to do it. You should have come to me, Lucien said again. I would have helped you. I know, but I was scared and desperate, and I made the wrong choice. Tears were streaming down Vincent's face now. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. But please, please help me find my daughter. After that, you can do whatever you want to me. Just help me save Elena first. Lucien looked at Marco. Marco's face was carved from stone, but his hands were shaking where they held the gun. 20 years of partnership, 20 years of watching each other's backs. And now this. What do you want to do? Lucien asked him. I don't know. Marco's voice was barely audible. He's my brother, but he betrayed us. Betrayed you. Nearly got Isabella killed. I don't know what the right answer is. There isn't a right answer. There's just what we choose to live with. Marco was quiet for a long time. Then slowly, he lowered the gun. Find his daughter. Then do what you need to do. Vincent let out a sob of relief. Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Lucien said coldly, because finding Elena doesn't change what you did. It doesn't erase Isabella's pain or the fact that you chose to save your family by destroying mine. So we're going to find your daughter, and then you're going to answer for your choices. Understand? Vincent nodded. I understand. Good. Then tell me everything you know about who took her and where they might be keeping her. And Vincent, Lucien crouched down so they were eye level. If you're lying to me about any of this, if this is another setup or another betrayal, I will kill Elena myself just to make sure you die knowing you failed her. Are we clear? Vincent's face went white. Crystal clear. Then start talking. Vincent talked. He told them about Miguel Reyes making contact 3 weeks ago, about the threats and the photographs of Elena playing in her schoolyard, about the instructions to disable security and unlock the elevator and look the other way while they took Isabella, about the promises that Elena would be released once Lucien was neutralized. He told them everything, and with every word, Lucien felt his rage crystallizing into something harder, colder, more lethal than anger had ever been. They were going to war, not for territory, not for profit, not even for revenge, for family. And in that moment, Lucien understood something fundamental about himself that he'd been avoiding for years. He wasn't the man who'd killed his first victim in a Cicero basement anymore. He wasn't the cold, calculating criminal who'd built an empire on fear and blood anymore. He was something more dangerous, a man with something to lose, and he would burn the world down to protect it. Finding Elena Calabrese took 36 hours of following blood trails through Chicago's underworld. Vincent gave them names, locations, every scrap of information he'd managed to gather while pretending to cooperate with Miguel Reyes and the Sinaloa people. It wasn't much. The cartels didn't trust him enough to share operational details, but it was enough to start pulling threads. Lucien pulled those threads with methodical brutality. The first lead was a weapons dealer in Pilsen who'd sold Miguel's crew untraceable firearms 2 weeks before Isabella's kidnapping. Lucien and Marco found him in a basement apartment counting money with 3 armed guards standing watch. The guards died fast. The dealer took longer. By the time Lucien was finished with him, the man had given up the location of a safe house in Little Village where Miguel sometimes kept high-value prisoners. The safe house was empty when they hit it at dawn, but the evidence was there. Zip ties with traces of blood, a child's shoe that Vincent identified as Elena's through tears that wouldn't stop coming, fresh tire tracks leading away from the property. Someone had moved her within the past 12 hours. They were always 12 hours behind. The second lead came from a corrupt detective on the South Side who'd been feeding information to the cartels for years. He gave up Miguel's cell phone number after Lucien broke 3 of his fingers and promised to break the rest. Marco ran the number through their contacts in the phone company. It pinged off a tower near the industrial district where they'd found Isabella. They were getting closer. Isabella insisted on coming with them for the 3rd location. Lucien had tried to talk her out of it. She'd only been released from medical observation 18 hours ago. Her ribs were still taped. The bruises on her face had darkened from purple to a sickly yellow-green. She moved like every step hurt, but her eyes were clear, hard, and when she said, "I'm coming," there was no room for argument, so she came. The 3rd location was a meatpacking plant that had been shut down for health violations 3 years ago. The kind of place where screams could echo off tile and concrete and nobody outside would hear a thing. Miguel's crew used it as a staging area, loading and unloading shipments, conducting business that required privacy, dealing with problems that required solutions you couldn't find in polite society. They hit it at midnight with a team of 12. Not subtle, not careful, just overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The front guards went down before they could raise their weapons. Lucien led the way through the main floor, his pistol an extension of his arm, firing with the kind of accuracy that came from decades of practice. Marco was on his right, moving in synchronized rhythm, covering angles and clearing corners. Isabella stayed behind them with 2 guards, a borrowed pistol held steady in her hands despite the tremor running through her body. They found Miguel in the back office. He was bent over a desk covered in shipping manifests and cash, a cell phone pressed to his ear, when Lucien kicked the door open. Miguel looked up, saw Death walking toward him, dropped the phone, and reached for the gun on his belt. Lucien shot him in the shoulder before his hand made contact. Miguel spun backward and hit the wall hard enough to crack plaster. Blood bloomed across his shirt. He was gasping, eyes wide with shock and pain, trying to process how Lucien Moretti had just walked into his sanctuary like he owned it. "Where's the girl?" Lucien asked quietly. Miguel's face twisted into something between a snarl and a grin. "Fuck you." Lucien shot him in the other shoulder. Miguel screamed, his legs buckled. He slid down the wall, leaving a red smear across the white plaster. "You're dead, you hear me? You're fucking dead. My people will—" "Your people are dead." Lucien's voice was flat, empty. "Everyone outside is dead. Everyone who works for you is either dead or running. You're alone. And in about 30 seconds, you're going to tell me where Elena Calabrese is, or I'm going to start removing body parts." "She's already dead." Miguel spat blood. "We killed her 2 days ago when Vincent stopped cooperating. Dumped her body in the river where nobody will ever—" Vincent appeared in the doorway. His face was a mask of anguish and rage. Before anyone could stop him, he crossed the room and drove a knife into Miguel's stomach. Miguel gasped. His eyes went wide. Vincent twisted the blade and leaned in close. "You're lying. Tell me you're lying." "I'm not—" Miguel coughed. Blood bubbled at his lips. "She's gone. Dead. Just like you're going to be." Vincent pulled the knife out and stabbed him again, and again, and again. Years of betrayal and guilt and desperation channeled into each thrust until Miguel stopped moving and Vincent was kneeling in a spreading pool of blood with tears streaming down his face. "Vincent." Marco's voice was hoarse. "Stop. He's dead. He killed her." Vincent's hands were shaking. "He killed my little girl." "We don't know that." Lucien crouched beside Vincent, careful not to touch him. "He could have been lying, trying to break you." "Why would he lie?" "Because dying men say whatever they think will cause the most pain." Lucien grabbed Vincent's wrist, stopping him from stabbing Miguel's corpse again. "We keep looking until we find her or find proof she's gone. Understand?" Vincent nodded slowly. He looked down at his blood-covered hands like he didn't recognize them. "I killed him." "Yeah, you did. Does that make it better?" "No, but it's done." They left Miguel's body where it fell and searched the rest of the building. Found evidence of recent occupation, food containers, blankets, a portable heater running in one of the cold storage rooms. But no Elena. No indication of where she might have been moved. Isabella found the cell phone. It had fallen behind the desk when Miguel dropped it. She picked it up with careful fingers and scrolled through the recent calls. Most were to numbers she didn't recognize, but one had been called 6 times in the past 24 hours. "Marco," she said quietly, "run this number." Marco took the phone and made a call to his contact at the phone company. 30 seconds later, he had an address. "Warehouse in the Port District, registered to a shell company. Same shell company that owns the container where they kept you." Lucien felt something cold settle into his chest. "How many people at that location?" "Unknown, but if Miguel was calling there 6 times in one day, it's important." "Then that's where we go next." Vincent was on his feet now, wiping blood from his hands onto his jeans. It wasn't working. The blood just smeared. If she's there, we get her out," Lucien said. "And if she's not, we burn that place to the ground and everyone in it. Either way, this ends tonight." Chumps. The warehouse was larger than the one where they'd found Isabella. 2 stories of corrugated metal and concrete blocks squatting beside the harbor like a malignant growth. Security lights mounted on the corners. 2 vehicles parked outside, a black SUV and a white panel van. Signs of life. They parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, using the shadows between buildings for cover. Lucien could feel Isabella's presence beside him, the slight hitch in her breathing, the way she favored her injured ribs, the determination radiating off her like heat. "You should stay back," he said quietly. "No." "Isabella?" "I said no." Her voice was steel. "They took me from our home, beat me, used me as bait. I'm not sitting this one out." Lucien wanted to argue. wanted to physically restrain her and lock her in the car until this was over. But looking at her face in the dim light, the set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes, he realized she'd already made her choice. She was done being protected. She was ready to be dangerous. "Stay behind me," he said finally. "And if shooting starts, you get to cover. Not heroics, just survival." Agreed. They moved closer. Marco sent 2 men around to the back entrance, another 2 to cover the side windows. The rest formed up behind Lucien as they approached the main doors. No guards outside. That was either very good or very bad. Lucien was betting on bad. He tested the door handle. Unlocked. Definitely bad. "Trap," Marco whispered. "Probably. We could wait. Call in more people. Do this smart." "We're out of time." Lucien looked at Vincent. "You ready?" Vincent nodded. His eyes were dead. Hollow. Like he'd already accepted whatever was coming. "Let's finish this." Lucien pushed the door open slowly. The interior was dark except for a single light source coming from the second floor. Stairs led up along the far wall. The ground floor was empty, just concrete and shadows, and the smell of rust and seawater. Too empty. They moved inside, weapons raised, covering angles. Every instinct Lucien had was screaming that this was wrong, that they were walking into a kill box. But they kept moving because stopping meant Elena stayed lost, and Vincent's guilt would eat him alive and the Sinaloa people would keep coming forever. So they climbed. The stairs creaked under their weight. Each step echoed like a gunshot in the enclosed space. By the time they reached the second floor landing, Lucien's heart was pounding hard enough to hurt. The light was coming from an office at the far end of the floor. Through the grimy windows, Lucien could see shadows moving, voices talking. Too distant to make out words, but close enough to confirm people were there. Marco signaled the team to spread out. They moved across the floor in a loose formation, using support columns and old machinery for cover. 50 feet, 40, 30. The office door opened. A man stepped out, tall, late 50s. Expensive suit that looked wrong in this setting. He had gray hair and a face that had seen too much sun, and eyes that calculated everything like a predator measuring prey. Behind him, being dragged by 2 guards, was a small girl with dark hair and terrified eyes. "Elena." Vincent made a sound, half sob, half roar, and started running. "Vincent, wait!" Marco shouted. Too late. Vincent was charging toward his daughter with his weapon raised, screaming her name, tunnel vision blocking out everything except the need to reach her. The guards saw him coming and raised their own weapons. Gunfire erupted. Vincent took 2 rounds to the chest and went down hard. Elena screamed. The guards were swinging their weapons toward the rest of Lucien's team when Marco and 2 others opened fire. Both guards dropped, but more men were pouring out of the office now. 6, 8, 10, too many. They had the high ground and better position, and they'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Lucien grabbed Isabella and pulled her behind a support column as bullets shredded the air where they'd been standing. Marco was returning fire from behind a rusted machine. 2 of Lucien's men were down. The others were pinned behind inadequate cover. They were losing. The man in the expensive suit was still standing in the office doorway, watching the carnage with clinical interest. He wasn't holding a weapon, wasn't ducking for cover. Just observing like this was a test he'd designed and was curious to see the results. "Lucien Moretti," he called out over the gunfire. His voice had a slight accent, Colombian maybe. "We need to talk." "Fuck you, Sal," Lucien shouted back, firing 3 quick rounds that forced one of the shooters into cover. "I have something you want, and you have something I want. Let's be reasonable about this." "Reasonable," Isabella laughed. The sound was sharp, brittle, close to breaking. "He wants to be reasonable." Lucien reloaded his weapon with practiced efficiency. His mind was racing through options. They couldn't stay pinned here, but charging the office would be suicide. And retreating meant leaving Elena and Vincent's body behind. No good options, only bad ones and worse ones. "What do you want?" Lucien shouted. "A conversation, face to face, you and me. Everyone else holds fire. And if I say no, then we kill the girl and wait for you to run out of ammunition. Your choice." Lucien looked at Isabella. She was pressed against the column, her face pale, her pistol held in white-knuckled hands. Blood was seeping through her shirt where one of her wounds had reopened. She looked back at him with eyes that had seen too much, and were still somehow burning with defiance. "Don't do it," she said quietly. "It's a trap." "I know." "So we fight. We find another way." "There is no other way." Lucian checked his ammunition. 2 magazines left, maybe 60 rounds total across his whole team. Not enough for a sustained firefight. "And that little girl is going to die if I don't try." "Then I'm coming with you." "No, you're not." "Lucien, it works." "If this goes bad, I need you to get everyone out." "Marco's good, but he's distracted." "Vincent's down." "You're the only one I trust to make the hard calls." He grabbed her face gently, forcing her to look at him. "Promise me. If I don't come back, you get our people out and you protect Sofia and Anna. Promise me." Tears were streaming down Isabella's face. "I can't lose you." "You won't. But I need that promise." "I promise," she whispered. Lucian kissed her, hard and desperate and final. Then he stood up and stepped out from behind the column with his hands raised. "Hold fire!" the man in the suit called out. The shooting stopped. Silence crashed over the warehouse like a physical force. Lucien walked forward slowly, his weapon holstered, his hands visible. Every step felt like walking to his execution. He reached the office doorway. The man in the suit smiled. "Lucien Moretti, I've heard so much about you. Wish I could say the same. My name is Esteban Ochoa. I represent certain interests in South America who are very concerned about your operation here in Chicago." "Concerned enough to kidnap children?" "Concerned enough to remove obstacles." Esteban gestured to the office interior. "Please, come inside. Let's discuss this like civilized men." Lucian stepped into the office. Elena was curled up in the corner, sobbing quietly. She looked unharmed, but terrified. Esteban's remaining guards stood at strategic positions with their weapons ready. "The girl goes free," Lucian said. "That's non-negotiable." "Of course, once we've reached an agreement." "What kind of agreement?" Esteban walked to the desk and poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter that looked obscenely expensive in this derelict setting. He offered one to Lucian. "Your territory, your distribution networks, your protection arrangements with local businesses. I want all of it." "And in exchange?" "Everyone lives. The girl, your wife's sisters, even your men downstairs. Everyone walks away and we pretend this unfortunate misunderstanding never happened." "That's not an agreement. That's a surrender." "Yes, it is." Esteban sipped his whiskey. "But it's a surrender that keeps the people you love alive. Isn't that worth something?" Lucien's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to grab Esteban by the throat and choke the life out of him. But the guards were watching, waiting, and Elena was still in the corner crying. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Lucien asked. "You don't. But consider the alternative. If you refuse, we kill everyone you care about one by one until you agree anyway. And by then, you'll have lost everything that matters and still have to give me what I want." Esteban set down his glass. "This way is cleaner, faster, less painful for everyone involved. You're asking me to destroy everything I've built. I'm offering you a chance to keep what actually matters. Most men in your position don't get that luxury." Lucien thought about Isabella pressed against that column bleeding from reopened wounds, about Sofia having nightmares every night, about Anna's anger and pain, about the family he'd accidentally built from the wreckage of Raphael's betrayal, about what he'd be willing to sacrifice to keep them breathing. Everything, he realized. He'd sacrifice everything. "Fine," Lucian said quietly. "You win. Take the territory. Take the networks. Just let the girl go." Esteban smiled. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. It's so rare in our business." He gestured to one of his guards. "Bring the girl to Moretti. Let him deliver her to his people as a gesture of good faith." The guard grabbed Elena and pushed her toward Lucien. She stumbled and Lucien caught her, lifting her into his arms. She was shaking violently, her face buried against his shoulder. "It's okay," Lucien whispered to her. "You're safe now. I'm going to take you to your Uncle Marco." He turned to leave. Esteban's voice stopped him. "One more thing." Lucien looked back. "Your wife, Isabella, she killed Rafael Velez, cut the brake lines herself. Did you know that?" Ice flooded Lucien's veins. "What?" "Oh, yes. Vincent told us everything in exchange for his daughter's life. How Isabella planned the whole thing, how she executed it, How she's been learning your business from the inside. Esteban's smile widened. She's quite remarkable, actually. I'm almost sad we have to kill her. You just said... I said everyone lives if you surrender, but that was before I realized your wife is a liability. Can't have her running around with that kind of information and those kinds of skills. Too dangerous. Esteban pulled a pistol from his jacket. So here's the real deal. You give me everything I want, and I only kill her. Everyone else lives. Or you refuse and I kill everyone. Your choice. The world narrowed to a single point. Esteban standing there with his gun and his smile and his certainty that Lucien would choose survival over vengeance. He was wrong. Lucien set Elena down gently. Close your eyes, sweetheart. Cover your ears. Then he moved. Esteban's gun was coming up when Lucien's fist connected with his jaw. Bone crunched. Esteban spun sideways and hit the desk. The gun fell from his hand. Lucien grabbed it and shot the nearest guard twice in the chest. The other guards were raising their weapons when the windows exploded inward. Marco and Isabella came through the glass firing. 2 guards went down immediately. A third took a round to the leg and collapsed screaming. The last one got a shot off that grazed Lucien's shoulder before Marco put 2 in his head. Silence crashed down again. Esteban was on the floor clutching his broken jaw, blood pouring between his fingers. Lucien stood over him with the stolen pistol pointed at his head. You made a mistake, Lucien said quietly. You threatened my wife. Wait, Esteban gasped. Lucien pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Esteban's body jerked once and went still. Brain matter and blood decorated the expensive desk. Elena was screaming. Isabella scooped her up and carried her out of the office, shielding the girl's eyes from the carnage. Marco was checking the bodies, making sure they were all dead. Vincent? Lucien asked. Marco's face was gray. Gone. Took 3 more rounds trying to reach Elena. He was dead before he hit the ground. Jesus Christ! Yeah. Marco's voice was thick. He died trying to save her. That's got to count for something. It counts for everything. Lucien holstered his weapon and walked out of the office. His shoulder was bleeding where the bullet had grazed him, but the pain felt distant, theoretical, like it was happening to someone else. They found Isabella on the ground floor with Elena, both of them sitting against the wall. Elena had her face buried in Isabella's shoulder. Isabella was stroking her hair and whispering things Lucien couldn't hear, but imagined were comforting. She looked up when Lucien approached. Is it done? It's done. All of them? All of them. Isabella nodded slowly. Fresh tears tracked through the grime on her face. Vincent? Didn't make it, but he saved her. That has to be worth something. Does it? After everything he did? I don't know, Lucien said honestly, but he's not our problem anymore. They sat there in this blood-stained warehouse while the sun started to rise outside, painting the harbor in shades of orange and red that looked too beautiful for a place where so many people had died. Elena eventually cried herself into an exhausted sleep, still clutching Isabella's shirt. Marco made calls to his cleanup crew, the people who specialized in making problems disappear without a trace. Lucien's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. But something made him. Moretti? He said. This is Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. The voice was crisp, professional. We've been monitoring communications between the Sinaloa cartel and certain elements in Chicago. We know what happened tonight at the port warehouse. We know you killed Esteban Ochoa and approximately 15 of his associates. Lucien's blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence. We have surveillance, witnesses, enough evidence to bury you for the rest of your life. A pause. Unless we come to an arrangement. What kind of arrangement? You have 48 hours to dismantle your criminal organization, shut down your distribution networks, liquidate your assets, and then you disappear. Leave Chicago, leave Illinois. Go somewhere we don't have to look at you anymore. And if I refuse, then we arrest everyone. You, your wife, her sisters, everyone in your organization, and we prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. Another pause. This is a one-time offer, Moretti. Take it or leave it. I need more than 48 hours. That's what you get. Clock starts now. The line went dead. Lucien stared at his phone. 20 years of building an empire. 20 years of blood and violence and fear and control. All of it evaporating like smoke because he'd chosen to protect his wife instead of maintaining plausible deniability. Isabella was watching him. What's wrong? FBI, they know everything. They're giving us 48 hours to disappear, or they're arresting everyone. Her face went pale. Sophia, Anna, will be protected. I'll make sure of it. Lucien ran his hand through his hair. It came away bloody. He wasn't sure if it was his blood or someone else's. But we need to move fast, liquidate what we can, hide what we can't, and get out before they change their minds about the deal. Where would we even go? I don't know. Somewhere far. Somewhere they can't reach us. Marco had overheard. He walked over looking like he'd aged a decade in the past 2 hours. I'll handle the liquidation. You focus on getting your family to safety. Marco, what? 20 years, Luce. You gave me 20 years. Let me give you this. Marco's jaw was tight. My brother is dead. Most of your lieutenants are dead. The organization is already dying. Might as well make sure something good comes from the wreckage. What about you? I'll figure it out. Always have. Marco extended his hand. It's been an honor. Lucien shook it. The honor was mine. They left the warehouse as the sun finished rising. Elena was still sleeping in Isabella's arms. The city stretched around them, indifferent, eternal, already forgetting the violence that had stained the night. 48 hours. 48 hours to dismantle everything. 48 hours to protect everyone he cared about. 48 hours to become someone new, or die trying. The next 2 days passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Marco worked with their accountant to liquidate assets, selling businesses, emptying offshore accounts, converting everything possible into untraceable cash and bearer bonds. The legitimate holdings got transferred to shell companies with ownership buried under layers of legal paperwork. The illegal ones simply ceased to exist, their operations shut down overnight without explanation. Lucien focused on protection. He arranged new identities for Isabella, Sophia, and Anna through a forger he'd used for years. Birth certificates, passports, social security cards, complete histories that would hold up under casual scrutiny. He liquidated his personal accounts and converted everything to physical assets. Diamonds, gold, cash, things that could cross borders without leaving digital trails. Isabella handled her sisters. Anna took the news badly. You're just running after everything? We're surviving, Isabella said tiredly. They were in the penthouse living room, surrounded by half-packed suitcases and the detritus of lives being dismantled. There's a difference. Surviving means hiding, pretending to be someone else? Surviving means living, which is more than we'll be doing if we stay here and let the FBI arrest us. I didn't ask for any of this. Neither did I, Isabella's voice rose. I didn't ask to be sold to a mafia boss. I didn't ask for our father to betray everyone. I didn't ask to be kidnapped and beaten and used as bait. But here we are anyway, so we can either adapt or we can die. Those are the options. Anna stared at her. You've changed. Yes, I have. Because the person I was before wouldn't have survived this long. Isabella's voice softened. I know you're angry. I know this is terrifying, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Anna was quiet for a long time. Then slowly she nodded. Where are we going? Somewhere warm, somewhere quiet, somewhere nobody knows our names or our faces or anything about what happened here. Will we ever come back? I don't know. Maybe. Someday. When it's safe. Sophia had fewer questions. She just clung to Isabella and cried. At 8 years old, she understood enough to be scared, but not enough to process the full scope of what was happening. Isabella held her and made promises she hoped she could keep. On the morning of the second day, Lucien received a package. No return address, no markings. Just a plain manila envelope left at the front desk by someone the guards couldn't remember clearly. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Lucien and Isabella leaving the warehouse at dawn 2 days ago. Elena asleep in Isabella's arms. Blood visible on both their clothes. The timestamp in the corner confirmed it had been taken moments after Esteban's death. Below the photo was a handwritten note. We know what you did. We know what you are. You have 24 hours, not 48. Run fast, run far, and pray we don't decide to find you. Agent Chen. Lucien showed Isabella the photo. She went very still. They're moving up the timeline. They're putting pressure on, making sure we don't have time to hide anything or set up contingencies. Will Marco be okay? Marco can take care of himself. We need to focus on getting you and your sisters out. When? Tonight. I have a plane arranged, private airstrip outside the city. We leave at midnight. Isabella looked around the penthouse, the space that had been her prison, then her home, then her battlefield over the past 3 months. I never thought I'd miss this place. It's just a building. No, it's where I learned who I really am, where I learned to be strong, where I learned that love isn't always gentle or easy or safe. She looked at Lucien, where I learned that sometimes the monsters are the ones who save us. I'm not a monster. Yes, you are. We both are. And somehow that's okay. They spent the rest of the day saying goodbye to the only life they'd known. Marco came by at sunset with 2 duffel bags full of cash and an envelope containing their new identity documents. Sarah Hartley, Isabella read from her new passport, from Portland, Oregon. Teacher, single mother of 2. I'm John Hartley, Lucien said, reading his own documents. Construction contractor. Widower. Not married? Isabella raised an eyebrow. Harder to track married couples. Easier to disappear as individuals who happen to be traveling together. Romantic. Practical. Marco cleared his throat. Cars are ready. Route is planned. You'll cross into Canada tonight, then catch a connecting flight to Mexico City tomorrow. From there, he shrugged. World's your oyster. What about you? Lucien asked. I'll finish cleaning up here. Make sure nothing leads back to your family. Then I'll probably head west. Start over somewhere nobody knows my face. Marco's smile was sad. Always wanted to see California. Marco, don't. We both know how this works. You can't look back. Not even for me. Marco extended his hand one final time. Take care of them. All of them. I will. They shook. Then Marco walked out of the penthouse without looking back. Midnight came with rain. Lucien loaded their bags into 2 black SUVs while Isabella got Sophia and Anna settled in the back seats. The girls were exhausted, barely awake, wrapped in blankets against the cold. The penthouse behind them was dark. Empty. Already feeling like a memory. Ready? Lucien asked Isabella. She looked up at the building one more time, at the windows where she'd stood watching the city, at the life she was leaving behind. Ready. They were pulling out of the underground garage when the shooting started. Bullets shredded through the lead SUV's windshield. The driver slumped forward, dead before he knew what hit him. The vehicle swerved and crashed into a concrete pillar. Go! Lucien shouted to his driver. Go now! The second SUV gunned forward. More gunfire erupted from the shadows. Lucien twisted in his seat and saw them, 6 men in tactical gear with assault rifles, advancing with military precision. Not cartel, not FBI, something else. Who the hell are they? Isabella shouted over the sound of bullets punching through metal. I don't know. They made it to the street. The driver was pushing 90, running red lights, weaving through sparse late-night traffic. Behind them, 2 more vehicles were giving chase, black sedans with tinted windows. Lucien's phone rang. He answered. Who is this? Someone you betrayed. The voice was electronically distorted, unrecognizable. Did you really think you could kill Esteban Ochoa without consequences? Did you think the cartels would just let you run? The FBI are irrelevant. This is between you and us now. You killed one of ours, so we're going to kill one of yours. Fair is fair. The line went dead. One of the chase vehicles pulled alongside them. The window rolled down. A man with a rifle leaned out. Down! Lucien screamed. He threw himself over Isabella and her sisters as bullets tore through the SUV's passenger side. Glass exploded. Metal shrieked. Sophia was screaming. Anna was crying. The world was chaos and noise, and the certainty that they were all about to die. Then the driver made a sharp turn into an alley too narrow for the chase vehicles to follow. The pursuers tried anyway. One of them clipped a dumpster and spun out. The other kept coming. They emerged onto a main street. The airport was 5 miles ahead. 5 miles between them and freedom. 5 miles that suddenly felt like an impossible distance. "We're not going to make it," the driver gasped. He was bleeding from a wound in his shoulder. "Too many of them. Too much open ground." "Yes, we are," Lucian said. He pulled his phone and made a call. "Marco, I need you." "Where?" "Roosevelt and Clark, they're on us. At least 6 hostiles. Maybe more. On my way. 2 minutes." The chase vehicle was directly behind them now, so close Lucian could see the driver's face twisted with determination. The passenger was reloading his rifle, getting ready for another barrage. Then a third vehicle slammed into the chase car from the side. Marco's truck hit them doing 60. The chase vehicle flipped twice and crashed into a storefront in an explosion of glass and twisted metal. Marco's truck kept going, executing a perfect bootleg turn to fall in behind Lucian's SUV. "Go!" Marco's voice came through the phone. "I've got your 6." They drove, through red lights and stop signs and streets that blurred together in the rain. The second chase vehicle had caught up and was exchanging fire with Marco. Bullets flew in both directions. Sparks flew where they hit metal. 3 miles to the airport. Marco's voice came through the phone again, strained. "Luce, I'm hit." "How bad?" "Bad enough. I'll hold them off as long as I can. But you need to get your family on that plane. Now." "Marco, no goodbyes. Just go. Be happy. Raise those kids somewhere safe." The phone went dead. In the rearview mirror, Lucian watched Marco's truck suddenly accelerate. It slammed into the remaining chase vehicle with enough force to send both vehicles careening off the road and into a concrete overpass support. The explosion lit up the night sky. Isabella was crying silently. Sophia and Anna were holding each other in the back seat. The driver was gritting his teeth against the pain from his shoulder wound, but keeping the accelerator pinned. They made it to the airstrip with 5 minutes to spare. The plane was waiting, engines already running. Lucien carried their bags while Isabella herded Sophia and Anna up the stairs. The pilot didn't ask questions, didn't even make eye contact, just waited for them to board and started rolling as soon as the door was closed.